Today, friends, I have a whopper of a video for you, and I'm super excited to share it. And that is because I am sharing 30, yes, 30 recipes that you can make in the Instant Pot. The Instant Pot is one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. And after this video, you're going to understand why, because you can get dinner on the table super quick for your family. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so if you've never made macaroni and cheese in your Instant Pot, you have to try it. This was my first time trying Instant Pot mac and cheese, and it was so creamy and delicious. I would definitely recommend it. So I'm starting out with my Instant Pot and 1 pound of rotini pasta. I'm also adding some butter and salt, and then I will add 4.5 cups of water. All of these recipes will be linked down below if you guys would like to try them out. Out of all 5 that I made, I think this one was probably my favorite. So after I have my ingredients in the pot, I'm just going to set the valve to sealing and then put it on manual for 5 minutes. This will cook it at high pressure and it cooks the noodles very quickly. Once the noodles are done, you can go ahead and let the steam out. Now, sometimes when you cook beans or pasta, you will get some sputtering from the valve, and that's totally normal. What I like to do is just put a little paper towel loosely over it to catch any of the splatters, and then I can go ahead and wash everything up when it's done letting out the pressure. So there are my noodles perfectly cooked. I'm going to put this on the saute function and then go ahead and add my broccoli. So I just have some fresh broccoli here that I washed and cut up into florets. Make sure that you leave them a good size, because after they cook, they will start to break up a little bit, and you don't want like broccoli mush in your mac and cheese. So after the broccoli has the chance to steam a little bit, we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. I'm going to add some garlic powder. This will give it a really nice flavor, along with some Dijon mustard. And then the dairy in this recipe is actually evaporated milk. Make sure that you use evaporated milk and not sweetened condensed milk. I've seen people do that before, and it is very unfortunate and would not taste very good. I'm also adding some cream, or half and half. I think I used half and half actually. And then I'll stir that around just to incorporate it, and then we can go ahead and add the cheese. So the warmness of the pasta and the broccoli is going to melt the cheese. I had some block cheese that I crumbled up and some sliced cheese. I basically just went into my cheese drawer and pulled out all of the sharp cheddar cheese that I could find, and then I'll just stir that together until it is all melty and combined. All right, and that is it. Your macaroni and cheese is done. Definitely taste it and see if it needs any more seasoning, either salt or pepper. If you don't care for broccoli, you could also leave that out, but this was delicious. All of my family loved it, especially my kids, and I will definitely be making it again. Okay, so the next Instant Pot recipe that I'm going to share with you is my ground beef taco recipe. This is my favorite way to make taco meat, and you might not think that it's worth it to make it in your Instant Pot, but the truth is like if you like that really fine, crumbly, tender ground beef texture that you get at restaurants, this is a great way to achieve that. So I have some olive oil in the bottom of my pot here, and I just have that on the saute function. I'm going to put 2 pounds of ground beef in there and just saute that up until it is cooked through. I'm using my Pampered Chef meat chopper to accomplish that. I'll link that down below. It's available on Amazon. And sometimes I get questions about which Instant Pot I have as well. I have an 8-quart duo, so I'll link the one that I have down below as well. Once the ground beef is cooked up, I'm going to add some Worcestershire sauce and then all of my seasonings. I'm not going to read them off to you, but there's like cumin and garlic powder and chili powder, salt, pepper. I basically mix those all together in a bowl so that when it's time to add them to the ground beef, I can just add them in one fell swoop. So I'm going to sprinkle that in and get it stirred around. I'm also going to add some beef broth to the pot. Very important when you're cooking in the Instant Pot. Always remember that you need at least 1 cup of liquid, regardless of what you're cooking, to ensure that the pot will come to pressure. If you don't add enough liquid, sometimes the burn signal will come up on your Instant Pot and it just won't work. It won't come to pressure. So you definitely need that liquid in there. So I'm going to set this to sealing, and then I'm going to cook this on high or manual pressure for 3 minutes. That is all it takes, is 3 minutes. You could definitely also make a larger batch if you wanted. Right now I'm just making 2 pounds, but definitely consider making extra. because this freezes great for later meals. So you can see here that it's done. There's still pressure in it because this little red dot is up. So once your ground beef has had a chance to do a natural pressure release for about 10 minutes. What natural pressure release means is that you don't do anything. You just let it sit and naturally depressurize for 10 minutes before you let the steam out. So to thicken this taco meat, I am going to use some masa flour. That is what the recipe calls for. If you didn't have this, you could try using like a slurry of cornstarch and water, or maybe a slurry of regular flour and water. I always keep masa in my pantry just for this recipe. So go ahead and stir that in, turn it on the saute function so that it will bubble a little bit and let it thicken up. So this taco meat does turn out a little bit looser. You can see there's some liquid in there, but we just use a slotted spoon to take it out, of the pot and serve it up. This is probably the best taco meat that you will make at home. The original recipe calls it like drive-through taco meat or something like that, but it tastes like, the ground meat that you would get in tacos at like Taco John's or Taco Bell or any, fast food restaurant like that. Okay, so here's what our completed tacos look like. I'm just serving that on some flour shells with sour cream, cheese, some lettuce and tomato. You could use this mixture also for burritos or taco salads, whatever you'd like. One of the things that I think is the most challenging about being a parent now is social media and phones and how you let your kids interact with that. And that is where the sponsor of today's video comes in, Gab Wireless. Gab is the leader in safe smartphones and watches for kids, teens, and tweens. With no social media apps, no internet browser, and GPS tracking, Gab devices were built from the ground up specifically for kids and teens and are the way to keep your kids safely connected. One of the things that I think is really challenging about having kids now is that when you let them go over to people's houses, no one has a house phone anymore. And so if they're at a friend's house, either for a play date or spending the night, you want to provide a way for them to get a hold of you. And Gab phones and watches are still tech that kids actually want. There's unlimited talk and text, a clean music streaming app, and hundreds of third-party apps that can be installed at parents' discretion. Other safe device options or parental controls let you know what's already been accessed, but Gab's phones and watches are built with smart filtration that proactively blocks harmful content before it even reaches your kid. And here's the best part. Right now, Gab is offering huge discounts on phones and watches for new customers, plus there is no contract required. Just go to gabb.com/Chapin. That's where you're going to get the best deal. So if you want your kids to be able to communicate with you and still be protected, Gab is the way to go. Once again, I'll have that link in the description box below. Gab.com/Chapin. Terms and conditions apply. So don't miss out. Next, I'm going to show you how to make a one-pot chicken burrito bowl in the Instant Pot. So I'm starting out with some chicken breast that I've diced up, and I've went ahead and pre-seasoned this with some taco seasoning. I just put it into a Ziploc bag and added 1 packet of taco seasoning, and I'm adding that to the Instant Pot with some chicken broth. Okay, so I just stirred that around to make sure everything was incorporated. Next, I'm going to add some frozen corn. I believe the original recipe called for a can of frozen corn, but I have a can of corn, but since I have frozen corn in the freezer, I decided to use that. I added a can of diced green chilies and also some salsa. You can use any kind of salsa that you'd like. I will say that I think the diced green chilies did make this dish a bit spicy. So if you have young kids eating this or kids that are sensitive to spice, I would maybe cut that in half or leave those out. Next, I'm going to sprinkle my rice over the top, and then don't stir it around. Just make sure you leave the rice just like that. Don't stir it. And then close your Instant Pot, and you can see mine was set to 75 minutes. I think I cooked a pot roast or something like that. But all you have to do is put this on high pressure, and I'm going to cook this for 10 minutes. While that's cooking, I'm going to go ahead and get my ingredients for all of my toppings prepped. So I wanted to make sure that I top these with some fresh cilantro. I love fresh cilantro, so I'm just getting that in my salad spinner here, and I'm going to rinse that off. I'm also going to shred some cheddar cheese. You could definitely use pre-shredded cheese with this, which is probably what I would have done, except I didn't have any on hand. In fact, the only cheddar cheese I had in the house was this white cheddar cheese, which was totally fine. It turned out great. And so I'm just shredding this up on a block so that we can top our bowls with it. I had to give Murphy a little piece of cheese. You guys don't see me give him too much food scraps while I'm cooking, but I do try to indulge him every so often. So after my cilantro was rinsed off, I went ahead and spun that dry, and I'm going to chop some of it up so we can put it on our bowls. The ingredients that you top this with is definitely customizable. You can add whatever you want that you normally put on top of your tacos on these burrito bowls. I think the unique thing about this recipe is that everything is together all in one pot. So you have your rice, your corn, your chicken, everything all together. I will mention also that the recipe did call for beans. Connor really doesn't like beans, and so I left those out and just cooked them separately, but definitely you can add those if all of your family likes them. I also chopped up some romaine lettuce to put on the top of our burrito bowls, so I'm just putting that in my salad spinner and going to wash that off. So for the beans, I'm putting 1 can of rinsed and drained black beans into a saucepan, adding a little bit of olive oil and some minced garlic. I'm also going to add some salt and some cumin and just let those sort of simmer slowly on the stove while our burrito bowls cook. This is a great option if you have, one person in your family that doesn't like beans. Definitely just cook them on the side and you'll get the same effect. If you guys are new to my channel, you might not know that I'm totally in love with my salad spinner to wash everything, all of my produce, not just lettuce and greens. So those are available on Amazon. I'll link mine down below. I am also going to cut up some cherry tomatoes after I wash them for this. I'm just going to have them and put them in a bowl. You could definitely use regular tomatoes for this too and just chop them up into bite-sized pieces, but that's what I had on hand. So once the chicken and rice mixture is done, you can go ahead and let the pressure out manually. I just like to make sure when I do this that it's out from under my kitchen cabinets, and I try to direct it under the range hood and turn the fan on is what I normally like to do. So now you can see that the red button is down, so all the pressure is out. We're going to remove the lid. And then we can go ahead and fluff up our rice. The recipe also calls to add some cheese to this mixture. That's totally optional. I think that I did end up doing that, but you can see how everything is perfectly cooked. I just think it's so great how you can put chicken and rice and everything in there and it all cooks together. No muss, no fuss, totally easy. So I did add some cheese that made it a little bit creamier, and you can see this is what the mixture turns out like. It was really good. Like I said, it was a little bit spicy from the green chilies, so just keep that in mind if you have people in your house that are sensitive to spice. So here's my black beans. I'm just going to let those sit on warm heat until we're ready to eat. Here are my toppings. I have my shredded romaine lettuce. I put out some salsa, some chopped up cherry tomatoes. I have my shredded sharp cheddar cheese, some sour cream, some olives, some cilantro, and then I also set out some fruit and some tortilla chips. So this is what my completed bowl looked like. This is very hearty and very filling, and it makes a lot, and it's great as leftovers if you want to take burrito bowls for work the next day. Totally delicious recipe. I would make it again. Okay, the next recipe that I'm going to share is a 1-pot instant pot meal of baked potatoes, cheese sauce, steamed broccoli, and bacon. So the first thing that you'll do is wash and scrub and dry your russet potatoes, and then I just have them on a tray here lined with foil. I poke them with a fork and I'm drizzling them with some olive oil, salt, and pepper. What we're going to do is cook these in the instant pot and then put them in the oven to crisp them up. Now, I've made baked potatoes in my Instant Pot many times, but I have never taken the extra step to crisp them, and I think they're good either way. If you don't want to take the time to crisp them up in the oven, I think they'll be just as good, but it does add a nice little touch. So once those are seasoned, I have my Instant Pot here. I'm going to add a cup of water into the bottom, and then you can place your trivet in or a steamer basket, whichever you would prefer. Today I'm using a steamer basket, but you could also use the trivet that came with the Instant Pot. I will place my potatoes into the basket and set the lid to sealing. So I'm going to set my Instant Pot on high pressure for 17 minutes or manual pressure. The original recipe called for 20 minutes, but since my potatoes were a little bit smaller, I reduced the time a little bit. After those are done and the steam is released, I'm going to put them back onto my baking tray and sort of roll them around in the oil and salt that is on there. And then I am going to crisp these up in the oven. These will cook at 450 degrees for about 10 minutes or until they are crispy on the outside. So the next part is the broccoli. So I'm going to, again, use my same steamer basket to steam that broccoli. I'm just putting it into the steamer basket and adding 1 cup of water. Then I will put the lid on. The original recipe called to cook this for 3 minutes. I probably would not cook it that long the next time. It was a little bit overcooked for me. I would maybe try 1 or 2 minutes. I know that there are some recipes out there for 1-minute broccoli. So try that and see if it's cooked to your liking. While that's cooking and the potatoes are crisping up, I'm going to chop up some bacon. So we are also going to use the Instant Pot to cook up the bacon and make a cheese sauce. So I'm just taking about a half a pound of bacon and cutting that into small pieces, and I'll set that aside. Next, I'm going to grate my cheese for the cheese sauce, and I am just using some regular sharp cheddar cheese with my box grater. If you guys don't have a box grater like this, they're super inexpensive, and hand grated cheese just tastes so much better than the prepackaged stuff. And especially if you're making a homemade cheese sauce, I think that it does taste a little bit better if you do grate your own cheese. So now that the broccoli is steamed up, I'm just going to take that out of the pot and set it aside in a bowl. I'll just put a cover over that so that it stays warm while I make the bacon and the cheese sauce. Okay, so I'm going to use the saute function next on the Instant Pot to cook up my bacon. So all I've done is just drain out the Instant Pot and wipe it out with a paper towel really quick. And since you have cut this bacon into small pieces, it's going to cook pretty quickly. Just make sure that you stir it around so that it doesn't burn. Once it's all nice and crispy, I just removed it to a paper towel lined paper plate. And next I will make the cheese sauce. So I did wipe out my Instant Pot just a little bit with a paper towel just to make sure that there wasn't too much bacon grease left in there. I didn't want it to, make my cheese sauce a different color or anything like that. So I'm adding some butter to the Instant Pot. Next, I'm going to add some flour. So if you haven't made a cheese sauce before, it's very simple. Essentially, you just make a roux, so butter and flour cooked together over medium heat until the flour loses its raw taste. Usually it only takes about 1 to 2 minutes. And then next you add milk and seasonings. So typically I add salt and pepper. Sometimes I add dry mustard powder. Or you can also add a little bit of sugar too to your white sauce to give it a little bit of a sweet flavor. I know that sounds weird, not very much sugar, like maybe just a teaspoon. Just try it the next time you make my white sauce. I promise you it's good. So next I'm going to add in my milk and just whisk that up and cook it on the saute function until it is thick and bubbly. And then I can add the cheese. So the thing about this recipe I think that's really unique is that it just uses one pot, the Instant Pot, to cook all of the ingredients for these potatoes. So you have the potatoes, the steamed broccoli, the cheese sauce, and the bacon. If you wanted to speed this up a little bit, you could cook some of these components on the stove, obviously, while you were doing other steps in the Instant Pot. I made the recipe as it was written, and so I didn't do that, but that's just an option if you wanted to get this done more quickly. So you can see here that my white sauce is thickened up, so I'm just adding my shredded cheese to that. And at this point, I went ahead and turned the Instant Pot off so that it doesn't burn. The residual heat from the white sauce will melt the cheese. So I'll just stir that around until it is melted. And you do want to taste this for seasoning, see if it needs any extra like mustard powder or salt or pepper. Okay, so now that I have all the components completed, I am just going to assemble my potatoes. So I'm just putting my potato in a shallow dish, splitting that open, and then adding the broccoli with the cheese sauce on top. So delicious. And next I will add the crisped up bacon pieces. So I will say this recipe was very delicious and I would totally make it again. I probably would cook it in separate parts just so I could get it done a little bit quicker. But if you only want to dirty one dish, this is a fantastic way to use your Instant Pot and make a great weeknight meal that everyone in your family will love. All right, so the next recipe that I'm going to show you is this salmon and potatoes. So this is also a one pot instant pot meal, and my sister has been talking about this for a while, and so I wanted to try it out. This recipe is from the Food Network website. I'll link it down below. I have 2 pieces of skin-on salmon that I've rinsed and dried and just put them on a plate. I'm going to season them with some lemon zest. If you guys don't have a microplane grater, I would definitely recommend getting one. They're very inexpensive. I'll link the one that I have down below. They make grating lemon zest or any citrus zest really so quick and easy. So I also am seasoning the salmon with some salt and pepper and paprika. So I went ahead and set that aside, and I'm going to start on the potatoes, which will cook in the bottom of the Instant Pot while the salmon steams on top of it on a rack. So I just have some of these yellow potatoes that I got in the store. They come pre-washed, so they're great. I'm just having those and putting them in the bottom of the Instant Pot. I'm going to add some water and some salt, and then these don't even need drained after you get done cooking them. There's only 1 cup of water in there, and so you'll actually just mash them up. You'll see once it gets done cooking. So I also added some butter, and then I am adding this steamer rack. I believe this came with my Instant Pot, if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm going to add the salmon skin side down on top of that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on the Instant Pot and set this on high pressure or manual for 3 minutes. That is it. Super quick. Once that's done, you can do a quick pressure release. So just go ahead and let the steam out as soon as it beeps and it's done cooking. Like I said, I do try to aim this under my vent hood, especially when I'm cooking salmon or fish. My husband doesn't really care for salmon. Both my kids like it actually, and so he always gives me crap when I'm cooking it, but I don't care. I will continue to cook it. It's delicious. So you can see that the skin was sticking a little bit to the rack here, so I just went ahead and used my tongs to remove the whole rack. That's fine. We don't eat the skin anyway, so I just went ahead and removed that as I put it onto a plate. So I'm going to cover that with a little bit of foil just to keep it warm. And then I will start on my potatoes. So you'll want to just leave the water and the potatoes and everything in there. And I turn that onto the saute mode just to get some of the liquid evaporating, and stir that around with a wooden spoon. The next step is just to add some garlic. So I'm using my garlic press to squeeze a couple cloves of garlic into there. That's going to give these potatoes a really great flavor. The other thing that we're going to do is once we mash these up, we're going to add a little bit of fresh spinach, and that will wilt into the potatoes. That makes this really a complete, one pot meal with your starch, your veggies, and your protein all in one pot. I'm adding some butter, some salt and pepper, and then I'm just going to use my good old potato masher and mash those right in the pot. So once my potatoes are mashed up, I will turn the Instant Pot off, or you could probably turn it to keep warm, and then I'll add some spinach. So I'm just using some fresh pre-washed spinach that I got from the grocery store, and I did chop it up just a little bit. The heat from the potatoes will wilt the spinach, so you don't have to worry about cooking that. I'm just going to stir it in really thoroughly. So here's the completed meal, our mashed yellow potatoes with spinach. I have a side of lemon on there to drizzle over the salmon. And this was a really creative and definitely really good meal. I would make it again for sure. Okay, so for dinner tonight, I am going to be making this recipe for pot roast in the Instant Pot. My sister said that she uses this recipe and it's really good. So I've got some chuck roast here. I just kind of cut this into chunks so I could brown it better and fit it into the Instant Pot. But I've got mine here preheating with a little bit of olive oil in the bottom. And the first thing that I'm going to do is put my onion in there and brown that. While that's browning, I'm going to go and grab my carrots and give those a peel. Okay, so I've browned my onions. I'm going to remove those. I went ahead and added my carrots in here, and I'm just going to give those a little bit of color. Okay, and the next step is going to be to brown my chuck roast. So I just have my olive oil in the bottom of there. I'm going to brown these pieces, and then I'll finish browning these two. Once it's all browned up, we will deglaze with some red wine. But here are the veggies I cooked up. We're not going to add these until a little bit later, but you can see they have some really nice color on them. All right, so our beef is cooked. We're going to deglaze with half a cup of red wine. And I'm going to scrape all those brown bits up from the bottom of the pot. Okay, so I added some garlic. I'm going to add about a cup of beef broth. And then the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fish sauce and 1 tablespoon Worcestershire sauce. So that's what I have in here. I'm gonna stir this around, add the meat back in, and I think the onions. Okay, so no onions back in yet. The onions go in later. So put my meat back in here. I've got my broth in the bottom with the wine. I put in some fresh rosemary and some fresh thyme. So we're gonna put the lid on this. And then this is gonna cook on high pressure for 50 minutes. All right, so the 50 minutes are up, and I also let it do a 10-minute natural pressure release. And God, this is falling apart. It looks delicious. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove the beef to a pan. I'm gonna cover it and let it rest, and then I'm gonna put the veggies back in. All right, so potatoes are in. We're gonna add the carrots and the onions, and I'm gonna cook this on high pressure for, I think, 6 minutes. Okay, so just finished with the potatoes and the carrots. The potatoes turned out really tender, as you can see, as did the carrots. So I'm gonna fix up a plate and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so here's what my plate looks like. You can make a gravy out of the au jus, but we don't, or I typically don't. I normally just spoon the broth over the food. So I've got potatoes, kind of mashed them a little bit, put some butter, salt, pepper, broth, carrots, and the pot roast. This turned out really good. I would highly recommend this recipe. I will link it down below. Today I'm showing you how to make some Instant Pot egg bites. These are a copycat Starbucks recipe, and they are really good to have on hand in the refrigerator to reheat for breakfast during the week. So the first thing you're going to need is an Instant Pot. You will also need 6 eggs, 4 ounces of either chopped ham, or you could use bacon or cooked sausage as well. You'll also need 8 ounces of your favorite cheese. I'm using Gouda cheese, as well as some cottage cheese. The recipe calls for cream, but I had half and half in the fridge, and that's what I used, and they turned out great. And then you'll also need some salt and some pepper, and then hot sauce is optional, but I did add it to mine. To make this recipe, you'll also need these silicone egg cups. You can find these on Amazon. They're around $10 each. I'll leave a link below if you're interested in purchasing these exact ones. And then optional is this trivet. This makes it so that you can stack those on top of one another in the Instant Pot and make more than one batch at a time. So the first thing you want to do is just crack your eggs into a bowl, and then go ahead and grate your cheese. You can definitely use shredded cheese if you want to, but I always like shredding my own. So I'm just going to shred that up quick. And then the original recipe said to add it all to the egg mixture, but I saved some to add separately, so you'll see that a little bit later. Then I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of cottage cheese and half a cup of half and half. Next, I'll just season it with salt and a few dashes of hot sauce and some ground pepper. So you can use a regular blender to mix this up, but I actually find it a lot easier to use an immersion blender, which is what I'm using here. If you don't have a blender, you could also use a food processor. That would definitely work as well. You want to make sure when you're making this that you put this in a bowl big enough to blend it up, because you can see that it gets rather liquidy and you don't want to make a mess. Okay, so I'm just going to chop up my ham. Like I said, you could definitely use any kind of protein that you wanted in this recipe. I happen to have some ham on hand, so that's what I'm using, but if you had leftover crumbled bacon, you could use that too. So what you want to do is just put a little bit of your ham in the bottom of each of the little egg cups, and then I just went ahead and put a little bit of shredded cheese on top of that. And then I'm just using a small measuring cup to pour the egg mixture over the meat and the cheese. You can see that it kind of bubbles up a little bit, and so to make sure that I get everything all mixed up, I'm just taking a knife and kind of stirring it around a little bit, and that will give me a little bit of room to put a little bit more egg mixture on top. Don't worry about those drips on the top of the tray. You'll just be able to wipe them right off as soon as you finish cooking it. So next I'm just gonna fill up my second tray. Okay, so I have my Instant Pot here, and this is the trivet that came with the Instant Pot. So I'm just gonna place that in there and pour in 1 cup of water. This is what is going to steam your eggs. And then I will carefully put my first silicone tray there in the bottom on top of the trivet. Next, I'm going to put this 3-inch trivet on top of that. I'm actually not going to link this in the description box below, because this was definitely not the right trivet for me to purchase for my 8-quart Instant Pot. It was a little bit short and I definitely made it work, but you'll see at the end that the ones on the bottom were a little bit misshapen. So I would not recommend buying this size trivet. I'll have to do some research and get back with you guys on a better one. Either way, if you don't have a trivet, you could definitely just do it in batches. So the next thing you want to do is just set your Instant Pot to steam for 8 minutes. And then once it's done, let it do a natural pressure release for 10 minutes. And then go ahead and vent any additional pressure that's in the pot. Okay, so you can see that the little red button there is down. That means all of the pressure is out. So now I can open the Instant Pot. So here you can see the top batch, how they puff up, and then you can see a little bit of the mess that the bottom tray made. It still worked out fine. I was able to salvage them, but a little bit kind of fell over into the pot. I just fed those to the dog. Okay, so here are my egg bites. You can see that the tray that was on top looks a little bit prettier than the one that was on the bottom, but that's fine. They will taste just the same. So one thing that you can do is just pack these into containers and reheat them for your breakfast during the week. I'm just gonna pop these out onto a plate with a paper towel. They are a little bit watery just because of the steaming and all the liquid in them. So I find that that helps get some of the water out. But these are really good. I would definitely recommend making them. They are low carb, high protein, and just a great breakfast to have on hand. Okay, so the next recipe that we are going to make is buffalo chicken wrap. So here I've got some flour tortillas. You can either use flour tortillas or lettuce wraps with this. And then I've also got some chicken breasts and chicken thighs. I've got 4 chicken breasts and 2 chicken thighs. I've got some blue cheese. This is optional. And then I've got some lettuce for the wraps, and then Frank's Red Hot ranch for serving, and then 1 cup of chicken broth. So if you're gonna do a true 5-ingredient meal, I would probably, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. You could definitely leave the blue cheese out, and then you could use water instead of chicken broth, and then just season it with extra salt and pepper, and then you'd have your 5 ingredients. But I just wanted to give you a couple of different options in case you want to do something different. So I've got my chicken in the bottom of my Instant Pot. I'm gonna add my 1 cup of chicken broth. I'm gonna put the lid on. And then I'm gonna cook this on manual, which is high pressure, for 12 minutes. All right, so the chicken's done. I went ahead and drained out probably about, well, almost all of the liquid except for a 1/4 cup, just to make sure it stays moist. And I'm just gonna use one of my meat choppers to shred the chicken. You could also use a hand mixer if you wanted to, but typically this is pretty tender, so it just shreds right apart using this or a couple forks. And then once that's shredded, I'm gonna stir in my 1 cup of buffalo sauce. Okay, I'm gonna add my buffalo sauce. I had a little less than 1 cup just because that's all I had left in the bottle, but it's fine. I'm just gonna stir this up, and I just have this on keep warm just to make sure that the chicken stays warm. All right, so here's how these wraps turned out. Adam says they're more like tacos, but whatever. I mean, you could put it in a big tortilla and do a wrap, but I put the buffalo chicken on there, drizzled some ranch, some extra Frank's Red Hot, and some lettuce. Like I said, you could put other things on these. I think green onion would be good, chopped tomatoes, blue cheese if you like it, otherwise regular cheese. But yeah, super easy. Okay, so we are going to make some 5-ingredient chicken noodle soup in the Instant Pot. Here are the ingredients I have for this recipe. I have 1 whole chicken. You could also use regular chicken on the bone if you wanted to, or chicken breasts or chicken thighs. I also have some egg noodles, about 2 cups of those, some carrots, some fresh parsley, and some celery. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cook my chicken. So since I have a whole chicken, I'm going to place that in my Instant Pot. Okay, so once the chicken is in the pot, I'm going to add about 8 cups of water. Next, I'm going to add some celery, and I'm also going to season this with salt and pepper. I also added some of those parsley stems comes to the pot, and I'm just going to lock that lid on, and then I will go ahead and cook this on high or manual pressure for 24 minutes, and then I will let it do a natural pressure release just to make sure that when I let the pressure go that it doesn't spew all over the place. Sometimes I do have that problem. I want to know in the comments down below, how do you guys feel about Instant Pots? I know that sometimes they are a rather polarizing subject. Some people love their Instant Pot, some people are scared of them, some people have purchased one and it's still in the box. Let me know if you have one and if you use it a lot or if you're scared to use it. I would like to do like an Instant Pot for beginners video. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. But next what I'm going to do is start cutting up all of my veggies for the soup. Now, in the spirit of 5-ingredient recipes, I did just use carrots and celery and parsley in this particular recipe, but if you have onion and garlic, I think that would make a really great addition as well. And to make it even easier, I'm using baby carrots and just cutting those into bite-sized pieces. Next, I'm going to get my celery cut up. I prefer to chop this in as small of pieces as I can. And honestly, my kids aren't that big of fans of pre-cooked, or not pre-cooked, but cooked celery. But they did eat it in this soup. Actually, both my kids really like this. So if you have kids at home, even picky kids, I think this is a fantastic Instant Pot recipe for you to try. Super easy, quick, and crowd pleasing. Okay, so here is our chicken after it's done cooking. So you can see there that all of the veggies are cooked, and as a byproduct of cooking the chicken in water, we now have chicken stock to make our chicken noodle soup with. So I'm just going to carefully try to remove this with my tongs and put it into a baking dish and let it cool. I like to let it sit for probably about 10 minutes before I shred the meat off. Next, I'm going to add my egg noodles and my chopped up celery and carrots and put the lid on, and then I'm going to set this on high pressure for 2 minutes. That's all you need for the noodles and the veggies to cook. Once that's done, I'm going to add the shredded chicken in along with some more chopped parsley and give this a stir. At this point, you just want to season it to your taste, so you can add more salt and pepper or whatever you'd like. While that is resting, I'm going to go ahead and make some cheddar biscuits. So in this food processor here, I'm going to add some flour. Next, I'm going to add some baking powder, and then I will also add some salt and some sugar. I will have all of these recipes either linked or typed out down below, so don't miss those as well if you're looking for them. Now, this particular recipe is sort of a copycat of the Cheddar Bay biscuits from Red Lobster. If you've never had those before, they're really good. So I'm going to add some cubed cold butter to the food processor, and I also added 3 tablespoons of shortening, and then I'm just going to pulse that until everything comes together. I have about 2 cups of shredded sharp cheddar cheese here, and I'm just going to add that to the food processor as well, and then I will give that a pulse. And after that, you can just add your wet ingredients until it comes together. The food processor makes this super easy to put together. You don't have to knead it, you don't have to roll it out, you don't have to get your counter dirty. Super simple. So I'm going to go ahead and pulse that milk in. You can also use half and half if you don't have milk on hand. And then you just want to drop these onto a baking sheet. I just have a baking sheet lined with parchment paper here, and I'm using one of my cookie scoops. I believe this is like one of those 2 tablespoon cookie scoops. I did try to overfill it a little bit. The original recipe said like a scant 1/4 cup of dough is what you wanted. I wouldn't make them much bigger than that because they will obviously cook quickly on the outside before they have a chance to get done on the inside. But if you've never tried this recipe before, I highly recommend it. It's really good, and it goes really good with any kind of soup. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get my cheddar biscuits into the oven and let those bake. I believe it's at 425. Don't quote me on that. Once again, I'll have the recipe down below. And then after they are out of the oven and they're still hot, you want to brush some melted butter on them. So I have some butter that I melted in a saucepan along with some crushed garlic, and then I put some minced flat leaf parsley in there. So you just want to brush a little bit of these over the top. Don't skip that step because that's what makes the these garlicky and delicious. All right, so here is our completed 5-ingredient dinner tonight. We have our delicious homemade chicken noodle soup. Like I said, everyone loved this and it turned out so good. Highly recommended for these chilly nights that we've been having, and then had those Cheddar Bay biscuits on the side. We also made some fruit salad, and this was a delicious hearty dinner. Okay, so next up I am going to share a recipe for salmon with rice and cucumber salad. I have some basmati rice here that I rinsed and let dry, and I'm just going to toast this up in my Instant Pot in a little bit of olive oil. Now, I'm kind of cheating with this recipe, you guys, because I'm going to make the salmon in the air fryer and I'm making the rice in the Instant Pot, but I did make sure that the entire meal only had 5 ingredients, including the salmon and the cucumber and everything. So give me some grace. With this one, I'm just kidding. So in my pot with my rice, I added some chicken bouillon powder to that, some salt and pepper, and some water. And I'm just going to cook this on high pressure for 6 minutes, let it do a natural pressure release, and you'll have the most perfect, fluffiest rice that you will ever eat. And along with this, we are going to make some cucumber salad. So this original dish is basically sort of like a sushi rice, and then you have this cucumber salad on the side with the salmon on top. It's really, really good. Even if you like sushi, even if you don't like sushi, actually, I would try it. My kids ate this recipe up. My kids love salmon and they love cucumbers and they love rice. So any combination of that is definitely good. But I'm just basically cutting this cucumber in half and slicing it into half moons and getting it into a bowl. Okay, so in with the cucumbers, I'm going to add some rice vinegar and some sesame oil. So the 5 ingredients for this particular meal are sesame oil, vinegar, cucumbers, rice, and salmon. That's it. Obviously, we're using salt and pepper and olive oil, but you wouldn't think that this dish would be so delicious with just these simple flavors, but I assure you that it is. So after I added the sesame oil, I'm going to season it with salt and pepper and just give this a stir. Okay, so I've got some salmon here, and I'm just going to take this out of the package and add it to some paper towels to dry off. Again, I'm going to be making this in my air fryer. If you've never tried to make salmon in the air fryer before, it's super easy and it comes out really great each time. If you don't have an air fryer, just go ahead and either cook this in the oven, or you could also sear it in a skillet. All of them are good. So for the salmon fillets, I'm just going to season these really simply with salt and pepper. You could get more fancy with this, but obviously that's going to be more ingredients. Okay, so here is my seasoned salmon. I just put it on some foil in the air fryer, and I just like to use the fish button, which I believe cooks it at like 375 for 8 minutes, which normally ends up being just about perfect. Here is my rice after it was done cooking. My pot is sliding around here, but you can see that it is perfectly cooked, nice and fluffy. To the rice, I'm going to add some rice vinegar, and I also added some salt and pepper and some sesame oil and just gave that a stir to season it. Here is the completed plate. We have the seasoned rice with the salmon on top and some cucumber salad on the side. Highly recommend this super simple recipe. Once again, my kids wolfed it down. I will definitely be making this one again. Okay, so next up for 5-ingredient Instant Pot meals is a Tuscan beef stew. So for this one, we're gonna need some chuck roast. This is one that I just thawed out that was in my freezer, and then I cut it into large chunks. I've got some fresh rosemary, some fresh garlic, some tomato paste, and some red wine, and I've got my Instant Pot here as well. And then we will need some like pantry staple items, salt, pepper, maybe some water, and some flour. Okay, so the original recipe that I'm kind of adapting this from actually calls for both onion and garlic, but I wanted to keep it under 5 ingredients, so I decided to omit the onion and use just garlic because I felt like it would have more flavor that way. But if you have onion on hand, I think you can obviously add some to this and it would be just fine, although I don't think it's absolutely necessary. So some of you guys have asked me about this little garlic peeler before. It's just like a little rubber tube that I got on Amazon, and it works really well to peel garlic. I have seen before where people like put cloves of garlic in a jar and shake it up and the peels come off. I've tried that several times and it's never worked for me, but maybe I'm just doing it wrong. I have no idea. So anyway, I'm gonna tediously peel about 12 cloves of garlic, and then I'll show you how we put this together. Okay, so I've got my Instant Pot on the saute setting, and I'm just gonna add a couple tablespoons of oil, olive oil, to the bottom. And then I'm just gonna leave these garlic cloves whole but smashed, and I'm just gonna saute these for a couple minutes. Just watch them, make sure they don't burn. I just went ahead and used the whole bulb of garlic, but if you're counting cloves, I would say anywhere between 10 to 12 cloves of garlic. Okay, so these are starting to get pretty brown. I definitely don't want them to burn, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour in my 2 cups of wine. And then I'm just gonna wait until this comes up to a simmer and stir in the 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. Okay, so my wine is simmering, and I'm gonna put in 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, which is, well, pretty much the rest of this whole jar I'm gonna add. I think it was Juliana who sent me these cute little rainbow spatulas, so thank you. I sent you a thank you note, you should have gotten it already. Okay, so let me just stir this together, and we'll make sure that the tomato paste gets all incorporated and this comes to a bubble. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna add about 1 tablespoon of pepper, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add my chuck roast. I'm gonna season this with 2 teaspoons of salt, and I'll give this a stir until everything is combined. After you mix the tomato paste with the red wine, it kind of looks like barbecue sauce. Doesn't smell like barbecue sauce, but looks like it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the lid on, and we're gonna cook this on high or manual pressure for 25 minutes. And then once it's done cooking, we'll do a 15-minute natural pressure release. You know what I did? I totally forgot to add the rosemary. I was getting ready to clean stuff up, and I was like, I don't think I put that in there. So here we are, putting in the rosemary. There we go. All right, so the beef is done. I let it do a natural pressure release, which just means not to release the pressure until it all naturally releases on its own. And then I turn this back up to saute, because what we're gonna do now is, I've got 3 tablespoons of flour in this measuring cup, and I'm gonna add about 1/2 cup of the cooking liquid to there. And then I'm just gonna whisk this up until it forms a paste. And then the flour is gonna go back into here, and I'm just gonna stir it around until it thickens into a gravy. And then I'll taste it, add more salt and pepper if it needs it. Super easy, it smells really good. I think you could probably make this with whatever roast you have, you know, whatever's on sale or whatever you have in your freezer. If you have like an arm roast, chuck roast, I even think you could probably make this with sirloin. Rosemary sprig out. Okay, so I tasted this. It does not need any pepper. I think that it's already spicy enough with all the pepper that I added to begin with, but I am gonna add the remainder of the rosemary, so just about another, I don't know, couple teaspoons or so. Give this a stir. All right, so here is my completed Tuscan beef stew. Yes, I know it doesn't look very impressive right now, but that's because I'm actually meal prepping this for later this week. So here's the deal with this. As made like this, obviously it's 5 ingredients. However, you probably want to serve it with something like mashed potatoes or egg noodles or rice. If you're living that keto life, you could do mashed cauliflower or rice cauliflower. But the important part is that it tastes good. And I'm going to put some foil on this and put it in the fridge. And when I want to make it during the week, I can just pop it back in the oven, heat it through, make some noodles, make a veggie, and boom, we've got dinner. So highly recommend this, especially if you've got some wine to use up. You know, sometimes you have like half a bottle of red wine you don't know what to do with. This would be perfect for that and to use up some beef. So today I am sharing with you how I make stock in my Instant Pot. So today I'm going to be making beef stock, but you can also make chicken stock, turkey stock, vegetable stock, whatever in your Instant Pot, and it's my favorite way to do it. I think that the flavor is so much more concentrated, and I love having homemade stock in the freezer ready to go for my recipes. So what you'll need is obviously an Instant Pot. So I have the Instant Pot Duo 8-quart pressure cooker. I will link this exact one that I have down below. I got it on Amazon. I actually bought it several years ago on Prime Day, I think. But if you don't have an Instant Pot, I really can't recommend them enough. And if you don't have one and you're looking into getting one, I would recommend getting the 8-quart, just because I feel like you can fit so much more in there. Like, we only have a family of 4 and I still went ahead and got the 8-quart. Which I really like it, and I don't think that I'd want a smaller one. So this is the inner insert pot. Obviously this comes out and you can wash it or put it in the dishwasher. And then if you didn't know, which when I first started using my Instant Pot, I didn't know this, but these little tabs on the side of the lid actually fit into the handles. So you have a place to store your lid when everything's hot and you take it off. I'm sure that a lot of people know that, but it's one thing that I didn't know when I first started using mine. So just a tip there if you're not aware of that. The inner sealing ring also does come out to wash it, and I would recommend taking that out to wash it after you use it. You can put it in the top rack of your dishwasher. You can actually put the whole top lid in the top rack of your dishwasher too. So I've done it many times and I've never had a problem. So I have my Instant Pot, and then what I like to do is just save up my meat and veggie scraps in the freezer in my garage. So if you're making chicken, you can use the carcass from a rotisserie chicken. What you can do is, after you're done picking all the meat off, just throw it in like a gallon bag and throw it in the freezer if you're not going to make the stock right away, and then you can pull it out at a later time and make it. Or if you have other chicken bones, anything like that will work. So for beef, we basically save all of our beef bones and things from when we make a pot roast or when we trim beef or something like that. Like this was steak, I think T-bones that Adam had trimmed off to make something else. So we just kind of collect these in baggies in the freezer, and then that way when I have enough to make stock, then I can go ahead and do that. So I'm not sure if I'll use all of these. I have quite a bit. So I have 1, 2, 3, a larger bag, and then this smaller bag. So I don't know, we'll see what will fit in here. But those are my beef bones. And obviously when you use bones to make stock, or I guess you could really call it bone broth, it makes for like a richer tasting stock. Now, I'm not going to do this today, but you could use the saute function on your Instant Pot and saute the bones up to get a little bit more flavor. I don't really find that it makes that much of a difference, so I'm not going to mess with it today, but you could do that if you wanted to. Okay, so veggies is the next thing that you need. So I like a mix of carrots, onion, and celery for my stock. And so what I do, like you can see in here, there's baby carrots, celery, parsley, some lemons. These are extra leeks that I had. There's some green onions in there, celery. Anytime I have produce in the refrigerator that's about to go south, if it's something that I can use to make stock out of, I stick it in one of these freezer bags and put it in the freezer. All of this stuff you can put frozen into the Instant Pot and make stock with it. It works fine, it works great, and it's a great way not to waste produce. So once I get the beef in there, I obviously won't need all of this produce, but I'll just kind of take out of there what will fit into here, and then I will fill it up with cold water. So let me get everything into the Instant Pot. All right, so I have my beef bones in the bottom, and you saw me put all the veggies on top. So I actually have 2 more bags of frozen bones that I'm not going to be using, which is fine. I'll just put those back in my refrigerator, or I'm sorry, my freezer, and use them at a later date. So now we're going to season this. I'm going to throw in a couple sprigs of thyme. I have an herb pot on my deck, so I'm using fresh thyme. If you don't have fresh thyme or you don't want to buy it, put some dried thyme in. I'm sure it would work just fine, but I do like the fresh flavor of that. And then I'm also going to put in 1 bulb of garlic. So since this is going to cook in the broth and we're going to strain it, you don't have to worry about chopping it or anything like that. So I just basically used my chef's knife to cut off the top of the garlic to expose the cloves. That way I can get the most flavor out of it. I think garlic is one of those things that you definitely have to add when you're making stock. I think it just makes it taste so much better. I'm also going to put in 2 dried bay leaves. And just so you guys are aware, this isn't really an official recipe. This is just something that I've sort of made up as I've made it over the years. So I will do my best to type this out in the description box below so that you have it for future reference. And then I like to add whole peppercorns, especially since this is going to cook for a while. So I think I'm going to put in about, I don't know, a little more than a tablespoon maybe. And then I just have some kosher salt, so I'm going to season it pretty generously. I don't like bland stock. So that was probably about 2 tablespoons maybe, a little bit more. Okay, so those are all the seasonings and spices I am going to put in. So the last step is just to pour in some cold water. So I just have a pitcher here with cold water in it. There's not really a measurement for the water because it all depends on how much will fit in here. So basically I'm just going to fill it up. So there's actually a fill line on here, which you can probably see. So I'm gonna try to smash this down. But you don't wanna fill it, I mean, I have mine pretty, pretty full, honestly. But you don't wanna put the water line above that max line there. Otherwise, it'll be too full and your pot will either take a long, long time to come to pressure or it will not come to pressure at all. All right, so I'm gonna pour in the rest of the water. Let's see how much we end up using here. All right, so that was about 4 quarts of water, a little less than 4 quarts. And after you get the water in there, you can kind of try and sort of smash this down a little bit because like I said, you don't want it too high or it won't come to pressure. Okay, there we go. So now we're gonna go ahead and put the lid on. So just wanna seal it down and turn it. You can hear the little beep there. And then your vent back here, you just wanna make sure that that's set to sealing and not venting so that it can come to pressure. And then I'm going to set this on manual pressure for 60 minutes. Now this is gonna take a lot longer than 60 minutes because it will take some time to come to pressure since we have a lot of stuff in there, but I'm just gonna set it to high pressure manual at 60 minutes. And then once it beeps, you know it's turned on. So I'll try to keep track and let you guys know how long this takes to come to pressure, but I bet it'll take half an hour. So I'm just gonna let this sit and we'll wait until we have our delicious beef stock. So the Instant Pot just came to pressure. You can tell obviously because the timer is counting down, and then also this little red button here is up, which means that it's still pressurized in there. So this took about 45 minutes to come to pressure because I had it so full. So just keep that in mind. If you're using your Instant Pot and it's taking a while to come to pressure, it's just probably because it's so full. I did want to mention also that you don't necessarily have to have an Instant Pot to make this stock. You can also put everything in a big stock pot on the stove and simmer it for several hours and it will basically be the same thing. But like I said, if you have an Instant Pot, it's really a great way to make stock. So here is my Instant Pot. You can see that it's been doing the natural pressure release for 48 minutes, so I haven't touched it at all. I'm gonna go ahead and let the pressure out. You can see that there's still pressure in there because this little button is still popped up. The one tip I have for letting the pressure out is make sure that you do it away from your cabinet. So like what I typically do is just kind of turn this way, and then sometimes I turn my vent hood on because you don't want that hot steam coming up and hitting your cabinets or it'll ruin the paint and the stain or whatever. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip this to venting and let all the pressure release. So I'm going to show you how this made a little bit of a mess. So now I know that the pressure is released because this red button is down. However, when I did unseal it and let the pressure out, I did have some sputtering from the top, which sometimes happens when you fill your Instant Pot really full. So what I like to do is just put like a paper towel over the top of it. I actually just put it in a single layer so that it doesn't obstruct the steam coming out, but it also absorbs some of it. So it made a little bit of a mess, which is fine. I can obviously wash this. And then this little trap down here, or this little bin, I guess, is to catch the liquid if you have any liquid left over from when the steam is releasing. So that's what that is. You can just take this off and stick it in the dishwasher. I've done that plenty of times. So now that we have all of this pressure release, let's see what it looks like. It does smell really good. I can smell the beef stock. Woo, hot, hot, hot. Okay, so here is what it looks like. It looks really, really delicious, actually. So what I'm going to do now is remove the inner pot and just set it on the stove to cool for a little bit, and then I'll show you how I strain it. So you do have to be really careful with this because it's super full and super heavy, but I just used regular hot pads to lift it out of the base, and I'm just going to let it cool here on the stove for maybe 20 minutes before I strain it, just because it's super, super hot. So I'm getting ready to strain the stock, and this is what I use to do that. So in my sink here, I have a large oval roasting pan. I have several of these, and they have a lot of great uses. If you don't have one, I would recommend getting one. I got these from my grandma, but they are also available on Amazon, so I'll link this one down below. But I mean, you can use it to like roast turkeys, and I use it a lot if I need to like make a big batch of something. Oh, there's thunder, you hear it? My dog's going nuts. You can also make like a huge batch of Chex Mix in these, lots of different things, so they're super useful. And then this is sort of a fine mesh strainer that is an all-purpose strainer. I use this for everything, but I like it because it has these little tiny holes, and so you can even use it to strain rice or pasta or anything that you want. I got this on Amazon years ago, like way before I started doing YouTube, so if that's still available, I'll link it down below. So I just set the strainer into the roasting pan. I'd like to do it in the sink so that in case anything splatters, it contains the mess. So I'm just gonna pour the hot stock into the strainer. So after the stock is strained, I just like to leave it in the roasting pan for a little bit until it cools off. It's very, very, very hot. And so I don't like to necessarily put it into jars when it's that hot, just because I don't want to burn myself. But I do have it on a cooling rack here on my counter. If it's cold outside, like it is here in the Midwest during the winter, you can like stick this out in your garage or like out on your deck or whatever. I know that sounds weird, but I've done it before to make it cool off faster. But if it's not, you can just put it on a cooling rack, and that helps the air circulate underneath the pan so that it cools off faster. So I'm just gonna let this cool off until it's like lukewarm maybe, or just a little bit warm instead of like scalding hot, before I put it into jars. And then I also like to just put my strainer back over the Instant Pot insert to drain, because it will drain off some more of the liquid. And you don't want to waste that, obviously. And then you can see there's some beef in here, so sometimes I let this cool and then I just pick the beef off of the bones and give it to the dog, and then the rest of it I just discard. But like, it's interesting because you can see how clean the bone is, like how all of the meat and everything just fell right off of it. So this is a great way to just use up, you know, your beef bones and your scraps and everything, and just get every single last bit out of them so that you're not wasting any food. So my stock has been cooling for a little bit, and I'm going to show you how I do this process. There are probably different ways to do it, or better ways, or I don't know, but I've done this a couple times now. Well, more than a couple times. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So I have my stock here, and then I just have like a 1 cup Pyrex measuring cup with a spout, and then I have my glass jars here. So these are Anchor Hocking. I got them at Walmart in a big package. But another thing I wanted to mention is that you can freeze stock in glass jars. Now here's the caveat. You do have to make sure that you don't overfill them, because obviously as liquid freezes, it expands. And so you don't want to fill them up all the way. You want to leave, like, I would say a good inch in the jar before you put them in the freezer, because I have had mine crack before because I overfilled them. If you wanted to do them in plastic bags, you totally could, or get plastic containers or something like that, but I prefer glass just because it's nice and reusable. With plastic, it tends to like stain and stuff, and so this is just what I prefer to use. So these are just regular glass jars. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill these up, like I said, just about an inch from the rim, and put the lids on. So all I do is just get a scoop of my broth, and then since this has a spout, it's super easy to pour it in there. Now there are different like funnels and stuff that you can use, but I find as long as I have a measuring cup with a spout like this, it works out fine just to put it in there like that. So you can kind of see the color now that it's out of the pan. It definitely, all right, I'm gonna pull it up to there. It definitely looks like beef broth. So you can see even that there's probably like some beef chunks floating in there, which is fine. Now you do see at the top here, I don't know if it's gonna focus, but the fat is kind of rising up to the top there, which happens, and that's fine. Obviously, if you are going to use this fresh, you might want to use a fat separator to take that fat off the top, but since I'm gonna be freezing these, the fat, no, I'm sorry, I apologize, there goes the dog. Since you're going to be freezing these, the fat will rise to the top and solidify anyway. And so what I normally do is when I thaw them out to use them, I just take a spoon and scoop off most of the fat if I don't want that in my dish. So I'm going to go ahead and keep on filling these jars and we'll see how many we get. Okay, so I got all of the stock into these jars. I want to say these are 1 quart jars, but don't quote me on that. So it looks like I got 4 of those plus a smaller jar of beef stock. So this is what I have to show for my efforts today, and this is really good frozen. You can thaw it out. Any recipe that takes beef stock, if you want to make like beef and noodles or vegetable soup or beef stroganoff, or you know, anything that takes beef stock, this will be great in. It's awesome to have this in the freezer. You don't have to worry about buying it at the grocery store, and it tastes so much better. I also wanted to mention that make sure that you label the tops of your jars with what they are. So I'm just putting a B for beef broth, because if you put this in the freezer and you don't label it and it freezes, you might think it's chicken stock or vegetable stock and you might know what it is. So just a tip there to definitely label your jars. So for the first recipe I'm going to show you, this is the baked potatoes in the Instant Pot. I just have about 6 medium-sized russet potatoes here that I've washed, and I'm going to go ahead and poke those all over with a fork. You want to make sure you do that so that they don't explode in the Instant Pot. And the only other items that you're going to need are your trivet. This comes with your Instant Pot, as well as 1 cup of just plain water. Okay, so you can see I've placed my trivet in the bottom of the pot, and I just have my potatoes on top of that, and I'm just going to pour in that 1 cup of water. And then I'm going to set the Instant Pot to manual. And I went ahead and put 14 minutes on, which is what the recipe said, but I actually had to add 6 more minutes. So for medium-sized potatoes, I would definitely recommend that you do manual for 20 minutes, and that will probably, you know, ensure that those potatoes are cooked all the way through. Also, just make sure that your pot is set to sealing, and then just go ahead and let it cook. When it's done, you can go ahead and set the seal to venting and just wait for all of the air to come out. And you can see here, actually, mine had a little bit of steam left in it, or a little bit of pressure left in it, because it was kind of difficult to take off. But there are my completed potatoes. They turn out really well, super fluffy and tender. You can see here what's left in the bottom of the pot, just a little bit of water, and the potatoes are super tender. I'm just showing you how I served mine. I just had it open-faced with some of this cheese sauce. This is the Ragu double cheddar. It actually works really, really well for baked potatoes. And I put some steamed broccoli on top. So that is recipe number 1. Okay, so the next recipe I'm going to show you is the Instant Pot Sloppy Joes. For this recipe, you will need some olive oil, about 2 tablespoons of that. You will also need some lean ground beef. The recipe called for 1.5 pounds, but I used 2 pounds. And then you'll also need a chopped red bell pepper and a chopped onion. And then also about 2 cloves of garlic, which I usually use about 2 teaspoons of the minced garlic. You'll need some red wine vinegar, as well as some Worcestershire sauce. I'll also leave the link to the recipe down below if you're interested in printing it off. You'll also need some brown sugar, as well as some pureed tomatoes and some tomato paste. You'll also need some salt. I just have kosher salt there, as well as some freshly ground pepper. For spices, you're going to need some chili powder, some ground mustard, and then just a little bit of crushed red pepper flakes. You'll also need about 1/4 cup of fresh water. For serving, you will need some rolls. I am using some hamburger buns. So to get this recipe started, you're just going to set your Instant Pot to saute and then pour in about 2 tablespoons of the olive oil. And then next you'll just dump in your chopped onion and chopped red bell pepper. Also go ahead and add your ground beef to the pot. Next, you're just basically going to cook this until your beef is all done and the onions and peppers are soft. I love this meat chopper that I get from Pampered Chef. I've had it for many years and it really makes cooking up ground meats a lot easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and chop that up and let it saute until the meat is cooked through. The next thing I'm going to do is just add a little bit of the garlic paste. I love using this instead of fresh garlic. It just makes it so much easier instead of, having to chop garlic. So you can see here that I have my colander in the sink and I'm just going to go ahead and drain my meat. I still have the Instant Pot set to saute, so I'm just going to deglaze the bottom of that with that 1/4 cup of water and then add the drained meat and peppers and onions back in. You can see I made a little bit of a mess there, so I had to clean that up when I was all done. The next thing I'm going to do is just add all of my seasonings. I'm going to go ahead and add the 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar. I love this little measuring cup from Pampered Chef. It just makes, small liquid measurements super easy. The next thing I'm going to add is some Worcestershire sauce. You'll need about 2.5 tablespoons of that. Go ahead and also add your brown sugar. You'll need 3.5 tablespoons of that. Next, I'm going to add the tomato puree. This recipe calls for 1.5 cups of tomato puree. It was actually cheaper for me to buy the larger can, so I just ended up putting the rest in a Ziploc bag and freezing it for a later use. Now that I've added some of the ingredients, I'm just going to go ahead and stir this to combine since I still have it set on the saute mode. I don't want anything to burn or stick to the bottom of the pot. Next, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Same with this, you can freeze it for a later use or you can actually buy the tomato paste in a tube. I normally just buy it in a can because I don't use it that often. Next, go ahead and add your salt. I'm using kosher salt, and then black pepper. I just went ahead and added it to taste. Next, you can go ahead and add your spices. Again, I am using some chili powder, 1 teaspoon of that, along with 1/2 teaspoon of ground mustard. And then the recipe also calls for crushed red pepper flakes, 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon. I just put a tiny little sprinkle in there since my kids were going to be eating this and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't spicy for them. So next, after you add everything, just make sure that you stir it well. And then go ahead and put your lid on the Instant Pot and make sure that your vent is set to sealing. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and put this on manual pressure for 3 minutes. So go ahead and change that to 3 minutes, and then once it switches to the on position, then you just let it go until it's done. So the original recipe says to let this do a natural pressure release for 15 minutes, which I let it go about 10 minutes and it was fine. It did not have any pressure left in it. So once that naturally depressurizes, you can go ahead and take the lid off and your meat will be done. So you can see the finished product here. It just looks perfect. I really like how this turned out, and it was a big hit with my family. I just went ahead and toasted some hamburger rolls and served this on them with some pickles and some mustard, along with some potato chips and dip. So that was our dinner tonight. I highly recommend this recipe if your family likes Sloppy Joes. Okay, so the last recipe I'm going to show you is an Instant Pot buttery lemon chicken. So for this recipe, you're going to need some boneless, skinless chicken breasts, 2 lemons. The original recipe called for arrowroot flour, but I'm using cornstarch. You'll also need some salt and some butter, some paprika, as well as some dried parsley flakes. You'll also need some ground pepper, along with some chicken broth. Next, you'll need a cup of chopped onion along with a few tablespoons of garlic. And then I'm serving this over some rigatoni pasta. So the first thing you're going to do is just set your Instant Pot to saute. And then to that, you're going to add your butter. The original recipe did not call for this, but I went ahead and actually added some olive oil to the pot too, just to make sure that the butter didn't burn. So after you add your butter and your olive oil, then you can go ahead and add your chopped onion to the pot and let that saute. And then also along with the onion, you can go ahead and add about 4 cloves of minced garlic, which is about 4 teaspoons of this garlic paste. Next, you can go ahead and add a half a teaspoon of paprika, and then go ahead and also add your 1 teaspoon of dried parsley. So basically all of these seasonings and butter and oil and onions are just going to saute together in the bottom of the Instant Pot until the onions are soft. So while that was working, I'm just going to go ahead and season my chicken. I'm going to season one side with some kosher salt. The recipe did not call for this, but I'm going to go ahead and use some of the Trader Joe's 21 seasoning salute on the chicken. This seasoning is salt-free, and I like to use it on a variety of different meats that I cook just because I feel like it gives it a good flavor. There's some herbs and ground onion and ground garlic in there that I think goes well with most meats. So then I'm just going to go ahead and turn that over and then season the other side. Okay, so now that my onions and garlic and spices have been sauteing for a few minutes and they are soft, I'm going to go ahead and add my chicken. So I just went ahead and kind of put the onions to the outside of the pan so that my chicken could saute. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that to the Instant Pot and let that get golden brown on one side before I flip it over. Okay, so this has been sauteing for a few minutes. You can see that it's just a little bit golden brown on one side. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a fork and turn all of that over so I can saute the other side of the chicken. The recipe did not call for this either, but I wanted to make sure that it was extra lemony. So I went ahead and grated some of the lemon zest into the pot before I added the lemon juice. Once the lemon zest was in, I'm just going to have the lemons, and then I have a little strainer that I'm going to use to squeeze the lemon juice over the chicken. And I still have this set on saute, and so that lemon juice is kind of just going to deglaze that pot and bring up some of the flavor that is left from sauteing the chicken. Okay, so now you can see where my freedom with recipes starts. I'm adding a little bit of wine to the bottom of the pot. My sister had actually made this recipe before, and she is somewhat of an Instant Pot connoisseur. She told me she added a little bit of dry white wine, so I went ahead and added some Pinot Grigio to the pot, and you can see there that it's bubbling away. I did like how it turned out with this, so I would suggest adding that to the recipe if you're a wine drinker. Next, I went ahead and added about half a can of that chicken broth, and you can see there that it's bubbling away. So now I will just go ahead and add my lid, lock it on, and make sure that the seal is set. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this on manual and cook it for 7 minutes. This was actually perfect, and the chicken turned out super tender. I would recommend, if you had the same size chicken breast as mine, to go ahead and cook it for the 7 minutes. Since I was waiting for my pasta to cook, I went ahead and just let the Instant Pot naturally depressurize for about 13 minutes. When I vented the lid, there was still a little bit of pressure left in it, but definitely not much. So now you can see I'm just removing the lid of my Instant Pot, and to thicken the sauce, I'm just going to add a slurry that I made of a couple tablespoons of cornstarch with a little bit of water. Like I mentioned before, the original recipe called for arrowroot flour, and I know that a lot of people that do low carb use that, so you can definitely follow the recipe and use that. But since I don't have that on hand and we use cornstarch, I just went ahead and added that, and that will thicken up your broth in the bottom of the pot. So just go ahead and let that simmer on the saute mode until it is thickened to your liking. You can see here I served it along with some rigatoni pasta, a little bit of caprese salad, and some garlic bread. This was a super delicious meal and my family loved it. So I'm going to show you how to make some carnitas in the Instant Pot. This recipe is super simple. You don't need a ton of ingredients. So I've got a pork roast here. This is a picnic roast, which is a boneless shoulder roast. I just buy the boneless ones because I think that they are way more convenient, but I would recommend not using a loin because that's going to be very dry. It's probably not going to have enough fat in it. I have some chipotle peppers in adobo sauce. Some are diced and some are whole, but that's probably about 1/3 of a cup total. I've got some garlic paste. I'm going to use some adobo seasoning and some beer. I have my Instant Pot on saute, and I'm just going to season this pork on both sides with the adobo seasoning. So this has in it salt, garlic, black pepper, oregano, and turmeric. So you don't really need to add any salt. I'm gonna add the pork chunks to here. I just basically cut these in large chunks. You don't have to cut them exactly all the same size, like around 3 to 4 inches is fine. Once these are browned on one side, I'm gonna go ahead and turn them over. Okay, so once the pork has some color on it, we're gonna add in a bottle of beer. If you don't want to use beer, you can totally use chicken broth or beef broth. And I'm gonna leave this on the saute function so I can get some of the brown bits up off the bottom. We're gonna add our chipotles and probably about, I don't know, 4 teaspoons of garlic paste, or you could use garlic cloves crushed. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the lid on, and then we're gonna use the meat and stew function and just let that go 55 minutes, normal pressure. So after the Instant Pot was done, I did let it do just a little bit of a natural pressure release for about 30 minutes so I could make sure that the meat retained some of its moisture and got a little bit more tender. So after that, I am just going to remove the chunks of pork with a slotted spoon and put them in a shallow dish. I normally use like a big bowl or a 9x13 baking dish. And then all you have to do from that point is just shred the meat up. I usually use a couple of forks, and then any sort of like fat that you find, you can go ahead and toss that to the side. Obviously you don't want that in your meat. Once that is done, basically just return the shredded pork into the juices in the slow cooker, or I'm sorry, in the Instant Pot. And at this point you can taste it to see if it needs more salt, more spice. This was honestly perfect. I thought it turned out really good, but obviously adjust the seasoning to your taste. I served this on some corn tortillas as tacos, but this recipe is so versatile. You could make burrito bowls with it, or salads, or quesadillas, basically whatever you want. So we're gonna make some Instant Pot pozole. Instead of pork, we're using chicken thighs. So I've made pozole in the Instant Pot before and it was pretty good, so hopefully this turns out good as well. I've got 5 cups of chicken broth here. I used the Knorr chicken bouillon that I just reconstituted. I've got some garlic paste, some olive oil just to saute the veggies in, 1 big can of hominy. I've got some salt and then some spices in here. I've got onion powder, garlic powder, and cumin, and then a little bit of oregano. I've got a 7-ounce can of chipotle peppers in adobo, 1 onion that I diced up pretty small. This is gonna pressure cook, so it will probably break down as well. And then I've got a 1.5 pound package of boneless, skinless chicken thighs. All right, so I'm gonna put my Instant Pot on the saute function here, and I'm gonna drizzle just a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of there. I'm gonna add my onion and let that cook for probably about 5 minutes, and then once that is almost cooked through, I'll add the garlic. Okay, now if you've never used chipotle peppers in adobo sauce before, there's actually whole peppers in there, so you just want to remove those, and then we're gonna chop them up. You can buy the pre-chopped kind. I've seen it in my grocery store in jars, but this will stain your cutting board, so that's why I have a disposable cutting board here. Okay, so it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 peppers in there, and then the rest is just sauce. So we're gonna go ahead and use all of the sauce in the soup, but I'm probably just gonna use 3 of the actual peppers. So I'm gonna go ahead and chop those as fine as I can. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add my garlic. You need 8 cloves, so I'm just gonna use the rest of this tube. Okay, and then I'm gonna add my peppers, the sauce, and I've also turned the saute function off. I'm gonna add my spices, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add my chicken thighs, and then I'm gonna add my 5 cups of broth. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the lid on this, make sure it's sealing, and then we're gonna cook this on high pressure for 18 minutes. So this Instant Pot has been sitting here doing a natural pressure release for about 7 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and let the steam out of it. You can see that I have the steam valve kind of under my hood vent here. You wanna make sure it's not under your cabinet, or obviously if you put hot steam on your cabinet, the paint and the finish is gonna start peeling off. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take the chicken out. Actually, I might need a spoon to do this because it's gonna be super tender. And I've got a bowl right here that I'm just gonna put the cooked chicken in because I'm gonna go ahead and shred it up before I return it to the soup. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this back to saute because I'm gonna add the hominy. I went ahead and rinsed and drained this. Okay, so I added the chicken back to the pot after I shredded it. I'm gonna go ahead and add the juice of 1 lime. Okay, and then I'm just gonna remove a little of it with a spoon so I can taste it for seasoning. So I actually don't think that needs anything. It definitely doesn't need more salt. It doesn't need more spice. I think it's pretty perfect. Typically when you use that Knorr chicken bouillon, you don't have to add additional salt, but if you were to use like boxed or canned chicken broth that's not as salty, you may have to adjust the salt to taste. Okay, so here's what the chicken pozole looks like after I put it in a bowl. You can use any type of toppings that you want for this. I usually use like shredded cabbage, red onion, cilantro, lime juice. You can use thinly sliced radishes. You could even put avocado, cilantro, whatever on it if you want. Sometimes I also put a little bit of sour cream. I've never done crushed up tortilla chips, but I guess you could do that as well. But this is a great way to do kind of a shortcut pozole in the Instant Pot because the traditional recipe has you simmer the pork butt for like several hours with chilies and everything like that. So definitely a great shortcut Instant Pot recipe that you can make any night of the week. Okay, so we're gonna make some pressure cooker salsa verde chicken. So I've got about 6-ounce chicken breasts here. I've got a jar of the Verde's salsa verde. This is the mild one. You could use hot if you wanted to. Some garlic paste. I've got 1 jalapeno that I chopped up and took most of the seeds out. Some minced onion, cumin, and garlic powder. A 4-ounce can of diced green chilies. And then to add at the end, some chopped cilantro and green onion. I just kind of chop these all together and combine them because we'll mix this in at the end. And then some lime juice. I've got my 6-quart Instant Pot here. I'm gonna go ahead and just put my chicken breast right in the bottom. Now for this recipe, I would wait and salt it until you're done because sometimes, like even especially with salsa verde, it's kind of salty depending on the brand that you get. So just to make sure you don't add too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the jar of this, my seasonings, jalapeno, and then the recipe calls for 8 cloves of garlic. I'm kind of just gonna eyeball it. When you use the garlic paste, it's approximately 1 teaspoon per garlic clove. I'm gonna add in my can of diced green chilies. This is medium spice. I'm just gonna kind of stir this together just so the seasoning isn't kind of just sitting on top and so it actually gets mixed in. And then I'm gonna make sure that I have all the chicken covered up. You could also easily double this particular recipe. And if you have extra, I think it would freeze really well. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the lid on this, set it to sealing, and then I'm gonna cook it on high pressure for 8 minutes. Okay, so the chicken is done. I did let it do a natural pressure release for about 10 minutes. I'm gonna remove the chicken to a bowl so I can shred it up and then we'll return it to the sauce. We're gonna add the chicken back in. Give it a stir and then add the cilantro and scallions. I'm gonna add the lime juice. So I made this salsa verde chicken as a meal prep, but I also wanted to just kind of show you how you can use it. I put this on some tostadas with some cheese and tomato and cilantro and sour cream. But once again, a super versatile recipe that you can use for a lot of different things. And I think this particular recipe would work really well with chicken thighs as well. Okay, so I'm gonna make some easy lasagna pasta in the Instant Pot. So I've got 1 chopped onion, I've got a pound of 93% lean ground beef, some mozzarella and ricotta cheese, which we're going to add at the end, a bag of farfalle, a jar of marinara sauce, some garlic powder, oregano, and onion powder, and some salt as well. So I'm going to set my Instant Pot to saute. I'm going to add just a few tablespoons of olive oil and then my onion. I'm going to go ahead and add the ground beef. Okay, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add my seasonings. I've got salt, oregano, garlic powder, and onion powder. So now that the beef is cooked, I'm gonna add 1 jar of marinara sauce. I'll just give that a stir and let it heat through a little bit. And then I've got 4 cups of dried pasta. This is bow tie, but you can really use any kind that you want. You just wanna pour that on top in an even layer, and then pour over 2 cups of water. And then here's the important part. You don't want to stir this. You just want to kind of submerge the pasta in the water. And we're going to put the lid on. And then I'm going to cook this on high pressure for 4 minutes. So this is done. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick pressure release. Okay, so we'll go ahead and give this a stir. I believe you can cook pasta in the Instant Pot in 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off and just let some of the steam out. I'm gonna transfer a little bit of it just to a small bowl just so I can taste it and add more salt or pepper if I need to. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can just take a cup of ricotta and stir it right into the pasta in the Instant Pot, but I'm actually gonna make it separately just because I'm not sure if my kids are gonna love that. So I just have about a half a cup of ricotta in a bowl here. I added some dried parsley, and I'm gonna add, I don't know, maybe 3 tablespoons of Parmesan cheese. And then you can just top the servings of pasta with this. Okay, so here is how our lasagna pasta turned out. Definitely try this out. It's super easy, it does not take much time at all, and it's really good. Highly recommend it. We are making this recipe out of the Instant Loss on a Budget cookbook, which I'll link down below. It is the best vegetable minestrone soup, which I thought was the perfect fall recipe for the Instant Pot. So let me share with you the ingredients. So first I've got some nutritional yeast. Baby spinach, we'll need about 4 cups of that. Some onion, celery, mixed vegetables. I'm gonna use some peas and some squash and some zucchini. I have 4 garlic cloves. In here I have a mixture of spices. I've got salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, dried parsley, dried basil, dried oregano, and I think that's it. I've got some sun-dried tomatoes that I'm gonna chop and add in. You'll need some beans. I have dark red kidney beans and cannellini beans, about 4 cups of water, 1 cup of vegetable broth, and about 1 cup of fusilli pasta. You can use whatever type of pasta you like. If you're gluten-free, you can use that or just regular pasta. I also forgot to mention that you will need 1 can of diced tomatoes and some tomato paste. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start chopping up some of these veggies to get into the Instant Pot for this soup. So essentially I'm gonna start chopping the things that take the longest to cook, right? So onion and celery first. I'm gonna chop about 2 stalks of celery. I have this celery already washed and kind of prepped in my fridge. And when I cut celery, I prefer to cut it into smaller dice, just because that's how I like it, but you can chop it however you like. Got 4 cloves of garlic, and I'm going to use my garlic press to give these a crush or a mince, whatever you want to call it. My favorite way to process garlic. And then I'll pop this into the Instant Pot along with the onions and the celery. Okay, so this recipe is really flexible in that you can use, you know, pretty much any type of vegetables that you want. I have some zucchini and squash on hand, so I'm gonna go ahead and chop those into like bite-sized pieces and use those, but you could also use frozen mixed vegetables. You could use potatoes, carrots, corn, whatever you have on hand. Okay, I've got some sun-dried tomatoes here. I'm just gonna go ahead and chop these up into small pieces. I need about a 1/4 cup of these. Okay, so now at this point, my veggies are soft. I've got onion, celery, squash, garlic, and zucchini. I'm gonna add my 2 cans of beans, which I rinsed and drained. 1 can of diced tomatoes. Got some peas here. I'm gonna add my vegetable broth, pasta, sun-dried tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. I like to use this kind in a jar because it is very, very convenient to store in the refrigerator. I'm gonna go ahead and add all of my dried spices and 4 cups of water. Okay, so before I cook this, I just wanna make sure that everything is mixed up. Sorry, we've got some intense gaming going on here. I'm gonna cook this on high pressure for 6 minutes. Okay, so after the soup was done, I went ahead and released the pressure. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give this a stir. Everything looks cooked. And then I'm going to add in 4 cups of spinach. Obviously that doesn't need to cook because the soup is still very, very warm and it will just wilt down. And then at this point, I don't know, I'm gonna see, I may add some more broth just because right now it's a little more like a stew and I would like it to be a little bit more soupy. What better fall recipe than an Instant Pot applesauce? I've done this once before, but it's been a while. Super simple to make applesauce either in the slow cooker or the Instant Pot. I'll have the recipe linked down below. Basically, you'll need 8 apples. I have 2 like really large Granny Smith and then a couple smaller varieties. I only have 7 apples on hand, so we're gonna like improvise and use 1 pear as well, but this pear is like it's very hard, so it'll be fine. And then all you need is lemon juice, water, and some cinnamon. And then once the applesauce is done, we will taste it to see if it needs any sweetener. You can add either regular sugar or Splenda or stevia, whatever you want. But now I'm going to go ahead and give these apples and 1 pear a peel. Okay, so I've got my apples peeled. I'm going to cut these up into uniform chunks. You just kind of want to make sure that they're all same size. This pear is not ripe at all. As you can see, my mise en knife makes quick work of it. So for the apples, I just basically cut them in half and then cut them in half again, and then you can use your knife to cut out the core just on an angle, and that, you know, part will have the seeds in it, and then you just kind of toss that out, and then I just cut each wedge in half so they're about, I don't know, approximately 1.5 inch chunks. All right, so in my Instant Pot, I'm gonna add 1 cup of water. I need 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, so that's probably gonna be about half a lemon, and then half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And I'm just gonna kind of stir this together a little bit to mix it up. Okay, so then you can add your apples. If you have a bench scraper, that is a really handy tool for transferring items. I'll link a really inexpensive one down below. Before I turn on the Instant Pot, I'm just gonna toss this mixture a little bit just to make sure that all of the apples are as evenly coated as I can get them. So I'm gonna put this on high pressure for 8 minutes. This is actually an Elec Homes electric pressure cooker. There are many generic versions of Instant Pot electric pressure cookers. Some people ask me if they, you know, I think the Instant Pot brand is worth it. I would say, you know, the functionality is the same. They're both gonna do the same thing for you. I find the Instant Pot like buttons and interface to be more intuitive and I like it better, but this one works just as well. And sometimes it's nice to have 2, especially especially if you're cooking multiple things. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this cook on high pressure, 8 minutes, and then we'll let it do a natural pressure release. Okay, so here's what the applesauce looks like when it's complete. Actually, it's pretty much already in applesauce form. All of the apples have disintegrated, but there's a few chunks. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use a potato masher to mash it. I did also taste this and I thought it was just a tiny bit sour, so I'm gonna add just about a teaspoon of this baking sugar alternative, maybe a tablespoon. It's in a large batch. I don't want it super sweet, I just don't want it to be sour. I'm gonna stir that in. All right, to store my applesauce, I'm going to put it into a mason jar. I have a funnel here and that is the best way to get it in there without making a mess. These are super inexpensive. You can get them either at the store or online. I'll link the one I have down below. So my whole batch probably isn't gonna fit in this one jar, but I'm gonna fill this up and then see how much I have left. And like I said, you can just add seasoning to your taste. Not necessarily seasoning, I guess, but sugar and cinnamon would be the key word there. And this works really great if you have apples to use up in your fruit bowl or your fridge, because even the apples that are bruised, they're fine. You just throw them in there. Okay, so here's the applesauce I ended up with. I would say I probably ended up with about 4 cups. So I'm gonna stick this in the fridge. It's really delicious. You can keep it in the fridge for about 7 to 10 days, and you can also freeze it. I would also recommend, if it's for your kids, you know, packing it into these individual containers, and then you can have it in their lunch or for breakfast or whatever. Okay, so I thought it would be fun to include a dessert recipe in this video. So we are gonna make pumpkin cheesecake in the Instant Pot. I've been cooking with an Instant Pot for a very long time, but I have never made cheesecake in it. So this is gonna be an adventure. So I have my 8-quart Instant Pot here. I have a trivet in the bottom. We're actually gonna use a 7-inch springform pan. I believe I picked this up at Aldi, but it was a seasonal item, so I can link a similar one down below. But essentially we're gonna be putting water in the bottom of the Instant Pot, and then the cheesecake will sit up here and it will bake like that. I will link the original recipe that I'm using down below, but I'm gonna modify a few things just to make it have a little less sugar. So for the crust, I am going to be using some pecans, some walnuts that I have here, and some of these grain-free cookies. This is the peanut butter flavor, but honestly, I'm just gonna use a little bit of it for like the crunch factor. The original recipe, I believe, calls for ginger snap cookies. I also have some melted butter. Instead of sugar, I'm gonna be using this baking sugar alternative from King Arthur Baking Company. So it's sugar-free. I've got pumpkin pie spice, cinnamon, some vanilla, half a cup of heavy cream, pinch of salt. I'm gonna need 12 ounces of cream cheese, which I have softened, some cornstarch, eggs, and 1 cup of pumpkin puree. All right, so I've got my food processor here. I'm gonna use this to make the crust. So in this measuring cup, I've just got some of those paleo cookies, I guess, and some nuts. Stick those into the food processor, and we're just gonna process these into fine crumbs. You could also, like the recipe says, use ginger snap cookies or even graham crackers. Okay, so that is into fine crumbs. I've got half a stick of butter here that I melted. And then the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of sugar. I'm just gonna use about half a tablespoon just because those cookies that I use are partially, you know, sweetened anyway. And then I'll blend this up. Okay, so see how it kind of all comes together like that? I'm gonna pat this out into the bottom of the pan. So here's my completed crust. I just sprayed this pan with cooking spray and just kind of pressed the crust mixture into the bottom of the pan. So this is gonna go in the freezer while we make the filling. I have my stand mixer here, and in the bowl I've got 12 ounces of cream cheese. I'm gonna use the whisk attachment because I think sometimes I feel like that gives the cheesecake a creamier texture. Definitely you're not probably gonna be able to do this by hand, so don't worry. If you don't have a stand mixer, just use a hand mixer. It'll work just fine. So I'm gonna whip this up until it is softened. I'm gonna add a little less than half of a cup of that sugar substitute. Sometimes I find when I'm using sugar substitute that I like to use a little bit less because it can be strong. And then in this bowl here, I've got my cornstarch, pumpkin pie spice, and a pinch of salt. I'm gonna turn this on and then I will add the eggs one at a time. So I just realized the one thing I didn't do was I didn't add any cinnamon to the crust mixture, which I was supposed to, but that's fine. It'll all work out. So I'm gonna scrape down the sides. Make sure that you're always, you know, doing that when you have a stand mixer, especially and you're making some type of batter, because otherwise everything won't get mixed properly. I did just go ahead and add a few extra shakes of cinnamon in here so that can, you know, compensate for the lack of cinnamon in my crust. So the last step is to add my pumpkin puree. I have a cup of that. I had a little bit left in the can since the can of pumpkin is more than a cup, but I'll figure out something else to do with that. You can also freeze pumpkin puree if you need to. I'm gonna add some vanilla. And then while that's beating, I'm gonna stream in the heavy cream, just half a cup. So filling is done. I'm gonna go ahead and pour that into my crust. It smells really good. I love me a good pumpkin cheesecake. I'm gonna pour 1.5 cups of water into the bottom of the Instant Pot. That is actually what's going to steam the cheesecake. And then I'm gonna carefully put this into, whoops, I said carefully. I'm gonna stick that in there. Hope that's level. I'm going to put the lid on this and cook this on high pressure for 28 minutes. So here's what our cheesecake looks like. I let it do a natural pressure release for about 30 minutes, which basically just means letting it sit without releasing the pressure valve. So I'm gonna carefully remove this and put it on a wire rack, and we're just gonna let it cool at room temperature for about an hour. So for this fall Instant Pot recipe, we're going to make a 1-pot pork tenderloin and mashed potatoes. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. So I've got my Instant Pot here. I've got about a 1.5 pound pork tenderloin that I got from the store. I just rinsed it and dried it. I'm going to rub this with some spices. So in here I've got salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, and Italian seasoning. I'm gonna use this garlic infused olive oil to saute the pork. I also need 3 cups of chicken broth. I'm using the Knorr chicken bouillon just because it's super convenient to mix that up. I've got some potatoes here. Those are actually going to cook with the pork. I'm going to end up peeling and slicing those. And then for the mashed potatoes, I've got some butter, cream cheese, milk, salt, and pepper. I will link this original recipe down below. I've got my Instant Pot heating to saute, and I'm going to put a couple tablespoons of the garlic infused olive oil in there. So for the pork, I'm just going to go ahead and mix these spices up and sprinkle those on there, and then just rub the spices in. All right, so my Instant Pot is heated up. I'm gonna go ahead and put my tenderloin in there. I'm gonna put it fat side down first, and if your Instant Pot is too small to hold your pork loin, just cut it in half. As this sautés, I'm just gonna turn it over and try to get it browned on all sides before I remove it from the pot. All right, so this pork is done browning on all sides. It looks great. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of chicken broth to the bottom to deglaze. And you just wanna take a spoon, and while that boils off, just scrape the brown bits off the bottom of the pot. Smells really good. All right, so while my Instant Pot is deglazing, I've got my potatoes here. I already peeled them, and I'm just gonna go ahead and slice these into maybe about 1/2-inch pieces. You don't want them super small because we are gonna end up cooking these in the Instant Pot, and we want them to get tender but not necessarily fall apart. If you guys have not tried these Misen Chef's knives, I highly recommend them. I have been using them for, I don't know, I'd have to go back and look, but it's probably been over a year now. Just in regular everyday life and on my channel, I honestly probably use these every single day because I cook a lot, and I highly recommend them. They are fantastic quality and they hold up really well. Make sure that you don't put them in the dishwasher, don't soak them in water, take really good care of them, and they'll last forever. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that all the brown bits are scraped off the bottom of the pot, and they are in with the broth, which is what you want. That's all the flavor from searing the meat. We're gonna make a gravy after this is all said and done. All right, I've got my sliced potatoes here, so I'm just gonna put those in the Instant Pot. I'm gonna make sure those are in an even layer, and then I'm gonna add my pork loin that's been seared over the top of those. Add the remainder of my chicken broth. All right, so this definitely doesn't take long at all. It just takes a 5-minute cook time on high pressure. So we're gonna do manual and then turn it down to 5. And then after it's done cooking, we'll do a natural pressure release. So after the pork and the potatoes are done cooking, you wanna do a natural pressure release, which I just took the lid off. That took about 24 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the pork to a plate and cover that with foil, and then we'll mash the potatoes and make the gravy. All right, so here's what we're gonna do to finish this meal. So I've got a bowl here. I'm gonna go ahead and put my mashed potato ingredients in there. So again, I've got cream cheese, butter, and some milk, or half and half, whatever you want to use. I'm gonna use a slotted spoon to take the potatoes out and put them on top of the like dairy mixture. That way it will help it start melting. And then we'll go ahead and mash that and season it to taste. Obviously it might need salt and pepper. Okay, so with like the juice or the broth or whatever you want to call it that is left in the bottom of the pan, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the Instant Pot on saute, and then I'm going to stir in a mixture of just cold water and cornstarch. This is gonna help thicken it, you know, into a gravy, and we'll whisk that as it thickens up. For the mashed potatoes, I've got a potato masher here, and I'm just gonna mash these, make sure everything is seasoned properly, and when everything is done, I will show you how our plate looks. All right, so here's what this dish looks like plated up. I'm not kidding. This may be like the most delicious thing I've ever cooked in the Instant Pot. I highly recommend you give it a try. The pork is super, super tender and easy to cut. The mashed potatoes are really delicious because, again, they were like cooked and seasoned with the pork broth. The gravy turned out good. I just sprinkled it with some parsley. We are gonna have this with a side salad, but again, highly recommend this recipe. It turned out so good. All right, so if you watch my grocery haul this week, you know I am going to try making some things from scratch this weekend in order to use up what we have, keep our grocery bill down, etc. So I am making Instant Pot yogurt this afternoon. I will link the recipe I used down below. I asked my sister, she's made this before, and this is what she says is the best recipe. So it calls for 52 ounces of Fairlife whole milk. You have to use this because it is filtered. I am going to sweeten mine with just 3/4 of a can of sweetened condensed milk. That's optional. And then for the yogurt to set up, you do need a starter.
I'm watching.
Oh.
I ain't gonna watch the video, so I might as well watch the making of.
So you have, you can use Fage. So I just have the 5% total Fage yogurt, and all you need is a tablespoon of that. So that's all that's in here right now is milk, a little bit of yogurt, and sweetened condensed milk, and I whisk that up really well with a whisk. Before I put all this in here, I sterilize my Instant Pot, so I put in a cup of water and just put it on high pressure for a minute just to make sure that the inside was clean. So now I am actually going to add a little bit of vanilla bean to it. I found a vanilla bean in the back of my spice cabinet. So let me show you how I take the seeds out of that. How you get the seeds out of this, or like the caviar, I guess they call it, is you just cut it with a really sharp knife and then kind of peel it open. And then if you scrape the little seeds out of here with the back of your knife like that, then that's what you end up with is basically the vanilla bean paste. So I'm just gonna put that in the Instant Pot. I really love vanilla yogurt, like real vanilla yogurt, the kind that has little, you know, flecks in it of vanilla. So I hope this turns out really good. All right, I'm gonna use the other half too since this is a lot of milk. I'm really excited. I hope this turns out good. So now we can whisk it up. Make sure if you're using sweetened condensed milk that you whisk it up really well so that it doesn't have any clumps in there. Okay, so the yogurt function does not use pressure. So you can use a glass lid. This is from one of my other pans that just happens to fit on here. But if you don't have one of those, you can buy a glass lid, right, you know, for your Instant Pot. And I'm gonna set this on yogurt for 8 hours. All right, so I'm gonna push yogurt. And it automatically sets to 8 hours normal. I just want to check the recipe and make sure that's what it says. Yep. So, okay. So that is it. So actually this is going to cook till 11 p.m. tonight, which now means I have to stay up till 11 p.m., but that's fine. I'm excited to see how this turns out. So I'm also going to make some fruit compote to go with the yogurt. And I'll probably have extra too that I can freeze if I need to, or we can have it on French toast or something like that. But in this, my trusty salad spinner here, I have strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries. So I'm just going to let these soak and get cleaned off for a little bit. And I'm actually going to make this in the Instant Pot too, but I have 2 Instant Pots, so I'll show you how to make this in a little bit. So I've got my berries in my Instant Pot insert, and the next step is to add a 1/4 cup of sugar and then just let these sit for 20 minutes before we cook them. I'm just going to give it a stir to get everything distributed evenly. All right, so these have sat for 20 minutes with the sugar. I put 2 teaspoons of orange juice in there. I'm going to cook this on high pressure for 1 minute and then let it do a natural pressure release for 15 minutes. All right, so the berry compote is done. I just removed the insert of the Instant Pot and I have it here on this cooling rack. It's a little bit soupy right now, but it will thicken as it cools. So once it gets cooled down a little bit more, I'll probably put it in a mason jar and stick it in the refrigerator. So here is all the berry compote that I got from those 2 pounds of berries. So basically 2 pint-sized canning jars, and I used my wide mouth funnel to transfer it into these. This is super useful for many things, not just this, but they're inexpensive. I think I ordered this on Amazon, but I'll link it down below if you want to get one. These are still a little bit warm, so I don't know if any of you guys do this, and it's not necessarily canning because it's not shelf stable, but if you pack things into a ball jar like this, a little bit warm, and you put it in the refrigerator, the lids will seal. And I'm not saying it's going to be good forever like something that's canned would be, but I've done this with soup and other hot liquids, and you can keep it in the fridge for a decent amount of time once they seal. So I'm not recommending that people keep, you know, stuff that you've refrigerator sealed in the refrigerator forever, but use your own judgment. I will probably only get through one of these at first, so I'll probably put this one out in the garage refrigerator and it will be good for a while. But I did taste it. It tastes really good. I was worried that the 1/4 cup of sugar wouldn't be enough for the whole batch, but it just has the right amount of sweetness and tartness, so super impressed with that recipe. I'll show you the yogurt. It looks like it's coming along pretty well. So it's got about 4 hours left. It's hard to see in there probably, but I'm not going to take the lid off, but you can see it's kind of firming up a bit. All right, it's almost 11, and here's what the yogurt looks like. You can see how thick it is. So I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, and we'll see in the morning how it tastes. Also, let's check on the yogurt, because I told you guys that I would show you that this morning too. I'm going to get this put into containers later, but you can see, I don't know, you probably can't see, but it's super duper thick. So I'm excited to give it a taste. I'm really glad I put the vanilla beans in there. I hope it turns out good. All right, so I put the homemade yogurt into containers. I put 4 of them in these little, I don't know what size these are. I think they're 8-ounce ball jars. So I just put a little bit of the berry compote in the bottom and the yogurt on top. So I made 4 of those. And then I put the rest just in this square container. I got this a long time ago. I feel like maybe I got it from IKEA. So my thoughts on this are that it is really good. It's very like rich and creamy. It's not a Greek yogurt. It's more of like if you've ever had Noosa before yogurt, it's more of that consistency. I will say also that the vanilla bean flavor is not as strong as I thought it would be.
Vanilla bean.
That's what I said.
You said granola bean.
I said vanilla bean.
Sorry.
Let's replay the tape. No, I'm just kidding. So I did. So I did go on Amazon to see if they have vanilla bean paste for cheaper than I saw it yesterday at Home Goods, and they did. It was $13. So I ordered a jar of that. So next time I make it, I think I'll use that and see if I can get a stronger vanilla flavor. But I think it's really good for a first try. So we'll see if the kids like it. Mostly Kira. She's the one that really likes yogurt the most. I was thinking too, I can make some lemon curd and do lemon yogurt also, but these will be good to have in the fridge during the week. So I would say I'm pretty satisfied. I kind of want to try making the Greek yogurt. I know that the website I used for this recipe also has a recipe for Greek yogurt, but it's a little bit different. So Anyway, I'm going to get this in the fridge. I am so excited to share this video with you today. My sister and I are in the kitchen making authentic homemade tamales, and this is so much fun to do. It is definitely a lot of work, but they are so good, and you will end up with over 100 tamales for your freezer. Okay, so if you've never had a tamale before, they are delicious, especially when they are made right and made homemade. So essentially what it is it's a dough made out of masa flour, with filling in the middle, usually pork, chicken, beef, or cheese. And then the dough is wrapped up in a corn husk and steamed. And they can be frozen after that and reheated later. So it's a great make-ahead dish. But the first thing you have to do when you make tamales is decide what you want to use for your filling. So today I picked up a pork shoulder roast from the grocery store, and as you can see, I cut that up into large pieces, and I'm going to use my Instant Pot to cook this until the meat is really tender and I can shred it easily with a fork. I've made these before with chicken and beef. Really, it's just a matter of preference. And later on in the video, I'm going to be showing you how to do some cheese and green chile tamales as well. So I don't really have a specific recipe for this pork, but I'm going to type out what I used in the description box below. I seasoned the pork pieces with salt and pepper, cumin, chili powder, oregano, and garlic powder. I put some olive oil in the bottom of my Instant Pot and set it to saute. I just want to get a little bit of color on those pieces of pork before I cook them. So I'm just putting them in a single layer on the bottom of the pot and letting them brown on all sides and transferring them to a dish. Now, when all of the pork is cooked, I want to make sure that I get the browned bits and flavor up from the bottom of the pot. So I'm mixing up some combination of chicken and beef bouillon, and I'll go ahead and pour that into the hot pot. As you can see, it'll steam up, and then I'm using just a wooden spoon to scrape those bits off the bottom of the Instant Pot. You don't want to lose that flavor. So I also am going to put some onion in with this to make sure the pork is nice and flavored. This actually turned out really good. It's probably the best shredded pork that I've ever made, and I would definitely make it like this again. One thing you want to keep in mind is you do want to do this the day before you're going to make the tamales, because you want to let the meat have time to cool. So to the mixture in the bottom of the pot, I'm going to add a little bit of chipotle and adobo, stir that up, and then add my pork pieces back in. I will add the onion on top of that and close the lid to the Instant Pot. Make sure that you set it to sealing, not venting. And then I'm going to cook this on high pressure for 90 minutes. And when it was done, the meat was perfectly tender. It was so good. Like I said, I'll type this recipe out the best I can in the description box below, but you can see how it's just like falling apart. It was so delicious. I also wanted to mention that if you don't have an Instant Pot, you could definitely make your pork like this in a slow cooker. I would just cook it on low anywhere from 10 to 12 hours, depending, of course, on how big your pork roast is, but it would work the same way. So once your pork is cool, I went ahead and shredded it up and put it back into the Instant Pot insert. So you want to make sure that whatever meat you're using, that you try to shred it as finely as you can. The tamales that we usually make are not huge, and so you don't want like big chunks of meat in there. You want the meat really finely shredded. You can see on the left hand side of the screen, I poured the broth from the pork into my fat separator. You don't want to throw this down the drain, because you're going to use this broth later to flavor both your meat as well as the masa dough that your tamales are going to be made out of. Okay, so once my meat is all shredded up, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of that broth from the pork into the pot, just to make sure that the meat doesn't dry out. Like I said, I'm going to refrigerate this overnight so that we can assemble the tamales the next day. Also, what we'll be doing the next day also is making a red chile sauce, which I'll show you how to do that as well. But here is the pork mixture. So the next day We started at about noon, and you can see here that I have some corn husks. You can get these at the grocery store. I've even found them at Walmart. You want to soak them in water for a couple hours before you make your tamales. The first thing that we are going to get started on is the red chile sauce. This is what goes in with the meat when you make your tamales, and you can also spoon it over the top of them when you eat them. So we're using some dried chiles that we got from the grocery store. I'll leave a link to the original recipe that we used as a guide in the description box below. I can't actually remember which types of chiles that we got. I don't think that we were able to find the same exact ones that were in the recipe, and so I ended up getting 2 different kinds, but that's fine. Basically, what you want to do is just take the stems off of the dried chilies and take the seeds out. So you can use scissors to kind of cut them open and just scoop the seeds out into the trash. You're going to put them on a big baking tray. I usually cover the baking tray with foil just to make for easier cleanup, and then we will roast those in the oven and use them to make our sauce. All right, so we roasted these in a 350-degree oven for about 5 minutes. You want to keep a close eye on them and make sure that they don't burn. Once you start to smell them, you can probably go ahead and take them out. We are placing them in a shallow dish, and then we will cover these with enough hot water to make sure that they are all submerged. And these will soak in hot water for about 30 minutes until they are soft, and then we will go ahead and blend them up to make our sauce. When the chiles are done soaking, you can carefully transfer them to a blender with some tongs, and then you're going to add about 2.5 cups of the chile water to the blender in order to get a good consistency. Once you have that added, just turn the blender on to the highest speed that it goes and whiz it up until it is nice and smooth. I'm also adding some salt and some cumin and some garlic powder to the mixture. So the thing about making homemade chili sauce like this is that the flavor is going to really depend on what type of chilies that you get and how hot they are. My best advice would be to just keep continually tasting it and adding to it whatever you think that it needs. We actually ended up adding a little bit of tomato sauce and sugar to ours because it was super spicy and we wanted to be able to eat it. We also had to add a little bit of water to water it down as well. But this made a huge batch. We were actually able to freeze some of this for the next time that we make tamales. And so that will be good to have that in the freezer. That way we won't have to do this step again. So I transferred the sauce into a bowl, and you can see that we're still tasting it, adding things that we think it needs. We added a little bit of water. The main issue was just that it was so spicy, and spicy is fine, but you want to make sure that it's not so spicy that you can't eat it. So yeah, we just added a little bit more water and sugar and salt and some garlic powder until it was to the taste that we wanted it. I'm going to pour some of that into my pork. This is the pork that I cooked yesterday. I just transferred it to a bowl. I didn't want to add too much sauce because my kids were going to be eating these, and I didn't obviously want to make them too spicy. But just add enough chili sauce to taste, get that mixed up, and the next thing that we'll get started on is the masa dough. So the easiest way to mix up your masa for the dough is in a stand mixer. You can definitely do this with a hand mixer or even like a pastry cutter or forks if you don't have that. The first step is to beat up your lard. So the recipe that I'm going to link in the description box below actually has you use shortening. We've done both ways, and I actually like lard better, probably because it is real fat and it tastes better, but it's definitely your preference. I know some people are weirded out by using lard, but anyway, to each his own. So I'm putting that into the mixer bowl and basically just whipping that up until it is fluffy, and then I will add the masa flour. If you've never bought masa flour before, sometimes it's in the grocery store, like in the Spanish food section, but sometimes it's also by the regular flour. So you'll just have to check and see where you can find it, but it's usually easy to find at most grocery stores. So basically for the dough, you will add your masa flour to your shortening or lard. Also, baking powder goes in there so that the dough gets fluffy. And then the last part is just to moisten the dough with broth. So I'm using the broth from the pork that I had the other day, and I'm also using some homemade chicken broth that I had in the freezer. You just want to basically mix this together until it forms a nice soft dough. Some people say like it should be the consistency of like thick peanut butter. You just want to have it so that you can easily form it into your corn husk and roll it up. So the first couple batches that we made of this, we really kind of like measured, but the last couple batches we made, we did not. We measured with our hearts is what we called it. So okay, so now it's time to assemble. We put a little, so I'll put a little bit of masa on the corner. What?
Well, we got it. I want to drink this beer. It's way more important than this. But
Yeah, that's fine.
keep it going.
Put some meat in the middle.
That's the
Then
problem with the world today.
roll. That's a country song.
Tuck and roll.
Tuck and roll. No, roll and tuck.
Roll and tuck.
Ta-da!
Little tamale.
Yeah, well, they're all different sizes because some of the corn
That's
husks are
right.
bigger. So the next step was just for us to basically assemble all of these tamales. So again, grab your corn husk out of the water. We dried them off a little bit. Put a little bit of masa in the corner, the top corner of your corn husk, and flatten it out. Place a couple tablespoons of meat down the center and then roll it up and tuck the end under. We are using some disposable foil trays to just basically hold the finished tamales until we put them into the pot. But yeah, this is kind of the fun part. So you can, you know, have a mimosa or a glass of wine or margarita or, you know, just a soda if you don't drink. But I just think this is such like a social thing to do. I wouldn't want to make these by myself just because I think it's more fun if you have a group of people or another person that likes to cook. I love it when my sister comes over and cooks with me because we both love to cook equally, and so it's always more fun to have someone with you like that in the kitchen. So we are going to go ahead and roll the rest of these, and then I'll show you how to steam them up. So once your tamales are all assembled, you will want to put them in your pot to steam them. Now this is a tamale pot that I got from Walmart. I'll find one on Amazon and link it down below. They're pretty inexpensive. There's a steamer basket in the bottom, and so you'll just put a couple cups of water in the bottom, put that down there, and then you want to stand the tamales up on end to steam them. So you'll probably need help for this part. You can see that I'm kind of holding them up while my sister is putting them in the pot. The one thing that you want to keep in mind is these are going to steam for an hour, and so just keep an eye on the pot and make sure that the water on the bottom doesn't dry up and burn. If it does, your tamales will taste like a scorched like taste, and that's not good. So you can see here is after we got them all stood up in the pot, there is some water on the bottom of there. So I'm going to go ahead and cover that up and steam them for 1 hour. So while that batch is steaming, we are going to get started on our batch of cheese and chile tamales. So these are basically the same process. You put the masa dough down on the corn husks. We are using the shredded Chihuahua cheese because it melts really well, and then also some chopped green chiles. So just put your dough down, sprinkle some cheese down the middle, and put a couple of green chilies in the middle and roll it up. These turned out really good. I would definitely make these again. I think these would be really good if you heat them up and serve them with like salsa verde and some sour cream. So good. So we're going to get finished assembling these, and this batch we're actually going to steam in the Instant Pot. So I will show you how to do that here in a second. Okay, so I have an 8-quart Instant Pot, so my tamales will fit upright. I'm not sure if they would fit in a 6-quart or not, but I have a steamer basket in there, which I'll link down below, with 1 cup of water in the bottom. And these will work the same way as the ones in the pot, except we will put them on high pressure for 20 minutes and they will be steamed perfectly. Okay, so here are the cheese and chile tamales when they are all done. You can see that cheese is nice and gooey. These turned out so good. We've never made them this way before, but we will definitely be making them like this again. Here is one of the pork tamales after it was all done. You can see that it unrolls from the corn husk really easily. The dough is tender. The meat is flavorful. So delicious. I would definitely recommend making these. Okay, so to store these, I'm going to use my vacuum sealer. This is one that I got off of Amazon. We did not previously have one, and it works for all kinds of things that you can store in the freezer. So I will link the one that I have down below, but if you get this one, just fair warning, you have to press down on it super hard before the vacuum will start up. I don't think the instructions were very clear on that, but otherwise it works great. So I'm just sealing the bottom of my bag, and then I will go ahead and add my tamales. I labeled them and then put the top of the bag back into the vacuum sealer, push it down really well, and push the button, and it sucks the air right out, and you can store these in the freezer. When you want to heat these back up, go ahead and thaw them out, and you can either heat them up in the microwave or steam them on the stove just like we did here, and they'll keep in a deep freeze up to 6 months. On this particular night, I was going to make some Spanish rice. Now, I'll link the original recipe down below. This is an authentic Spanish rice recipe, and it's the recipe that my mom uses. And it always makes really good rice, kind of like how you would have it if you ate out at a Mexican restaurant. So with this, I'm actually going to heat up some tamales that I made last month, and I have those in vacuum sealed bags out in the deep freeze. But essentially what you're going to do with the Spanish rice is just saute it in some oil with tomato and onion, and then you will add some water and different seasonings, chicken bouillon, some cumin, garlic. I'm not sure of all the ingredients because I don't have the recipe in front of me right now, but like I said, I will link it down below. And then you'll just basically simmer this over medium-low heat until the rice is cooked and all the water is absorbed. So for the tamales, these were in the freezer, and so all I did was thaw them out on the counter for a few hours. I'm putting them in a steamer basket in my Instant Pot with about 2 cups of water, and I'm going to go ahead and cook those on high pressure for 12 minutes until they are heated through. While that is cooking, my rice is continuing to cook. You just want to stir it about every 5 minutes, I would say, to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom and burn. I'm also making some quesadillas for Connor because he doesn't really care for tamales. And so how I make these is just I spray a nonstick skillet with cooking spray, and I just put some shredded cheese in the middle of a tortilla and brown it on both sides until it is cooked through. So here's a look at the Spanish rice. This also makes great leftovers. You'll have a bunch, so it's good. Leftover, definitely. And the next thing that I'm going to make for a side is some refried beans. So my aunt actually taught me to make refried beans like this, kind of semi-homemade. So basically you just put a can of refried beans in a saucepan, add a couple tablespoons of vegetable oil with some garlic and cumin, and stir that up. It will just make them taste so much better than if you took them straight out of the can. All right, so here are the tamales after I steamed them up. Those will just sit in there until we are ready to eat. And here's a look at Adam's plate. I just gave him 2 tamales with salsa verde and some sour cream, some beans and rice with cheese on top, and 1 cheese quesadilla. So this was a great quick dinner for us. So the next thing that I'm going to make is some Instant Pot chili. I actually have a separate video on my channel specifically for this recipe, which I can link down below. But I really love making chili in the Instant Pot. It is, to me, so much better. It tastes so much better, and the meat is so much more tender after I've made it this way, since I've had an Instant Pot for over a year now. So if you do not have an Instant Pot, you can totally make this on the stove or in a crock pot. But what I'm going to do is just put some olive oil in the bottom of my insert. I'm going to chop 1 onion up and put that in the insert as well. And then I'll squeeze a couple of cloves of garlic into there. I always get this garlic paste, which I find in the produce section at Walmart. It just is so much easier than chopping garlic. And then I will add 2 pounds of ground beef. So once this is in the Instant Pot, you can go ahead and set it to saute because you want to cook the beef before you add the rest of your ingredients. I'm just going to add some kosher salt and some black pepper, and then I will let that saute until it is browned up. Now, we get our beef from a local farmer, and so I usually don't have to drain our ground beef. Sometimes I get questions on that, but it's usually 90 to 95% lean, and so it doesn't have a lot of grease on it, and so I normally don't drain it. But if you had beef that had a lot of grease, I would recommend draining it. So to the Instant Pot, you can just add your diced tomatoes, your tomato sauce. I added 2 cans of beans, one like dark red kidney beans and one light red kidney beans. And then I'm just adding some chili powder, some cumin, some garlic powder, and salt and pepper. And then I just keep stirring it and tasting it and seeing what it needs. You might need more salt. You might need more chili powder. Just keep sort of mixing and tasting it until you get it to your desired taste. And I also like to add a couple teaspoons of sugar. With all of the acidity of the tomatoes, I think that really makes a difference in the finished chili. Okay, so once you get the chili seasoned to how you want it, you'll just put the lid on and set it to sealing. And then I just use the chili beans button on the Instant Pot. I think it sets it to 30 minutes on high pressure, which does a great job. And then after it is finished cooking, you can go ahead and let the pressure out. Just make sure that you move it so that the vent is not under your cabinet, because that will hurt your cabinets over time, having that hot steam on them. And it will take about 3 to 4 minutes to let all the pressure out. So once that is completed, here is your finished chili. I usually just scoop a little bit out into a bowl and taste it again to make sure that it tastes fine, and then add salt or pepper or anything that I think it needs. With chili, I like to serve corn muffins. So I'm just using some Jiffy corn muffin mix, and I'm making it according to the package directions. But what I would recommend is adding a little bit of honey to your batter, because I think that adds some sweetness, and I think it just makes it a lot better. So that's the only thing different I do, is add a couple squeezes of honey. But I just like to mix all the wet ingredients up in a mixing bowl, and then go ahead and add the Jiffy corn muffin mix. I just like to whisk it with a fork until everything is combined. I will bake this as corn muffins. I just think that they're easier to eat that way. So I'm going to use some paper muffin tin liners, just put those in the pan, spray them with some nonstick cooking spray, and then add the batter and cook them according to the package directions. We always like to have chili with our cornbread. It's just kind of a tradition, and everyone loves them, and they also make great leftovers warmed up. So this is totally a personal preference, and I don't always do this when I make chili, but tonight I felt like making it with some pasta. So I'm just cooking up some ditalini in some salted boiling water, and I'll just cook that according to the package directions. And then what I'll end up doing is just serving the chili over this in a bowl, excuse me, with some shredded cheese. And my kids are not huge chili fans either, and so if I make some buttered pasta with it, put that on their plate, and then put a little bit of chili on top, they're just more likely to eat it. Adam does not like pasta with his chili. He just likes it plain in a bowl with cheese and crackers. So it's just something that you can consider when you make something like this. Sometimes if your kids aren't wild about like the soup that you're making, they may eat it over pasta. So just something to think about. I'm going to shred up some fresh cheddar cheese. I'm just using a box grater, and I like to shred it on top of some wax paper so that it protects my counter, and it's easier to sort of scoop into a bag if I need to put it in a Ziploc bag. Here is the pasta all cooked up, so I'm going to go ahead and drain that. Here are the corn muffins. They cooked up perfectly in the oven. And then I'm just going to show you my plate that I'm fixing. So I have like a shallow bowl filled with the chili, and then I'll just put about a half a cup of the pasta on top and some shredded cheese. And this was a totally delicious dinner. It also makes really, really good leftovers. I had this several days this week for lunch, and it was really good. Okay, so this is the last dinner that I'm going to show you guys, and this actually comes from the newest Skinny Taste cookbook, which I will link down below, but it is a beef stroganoff noodle soup that you make in the Instant Pot. It is totally delicious, and there are also directions in the cookbook to make it on the stovetop as well. So you'll start out with a pound of ground beef and just saute that in the Instant Pot on on the saute mode along with some salt and some pepper. And then I also sprinkled some dried minced onion in there as well. I've been using this in place of chopped onions because my kids aren't super thrilled about chopped onions in their food. So the minced onions seem to work fine. But once the beef is cooked up, you'll go ahead and add about 7.5 cups of water, some tomato paste. And I actually think I didn't really follow the directions because I think you're supposed to cook the tomato paste and the flour in with the meat while it's still hot before you stir in the water, but I totally screwed it up. Anyway, it worked out. It worked out just fine. It was fine. So I put the flour in there along with some pepper, and then the recipe also calls for some different spices, some chicken bouillon, and some Worcestershire sauce, and it's really good. Normally we're used to eating like the ground beef not Alfredo, the ground beef stroganoff, which my kids really like, but this was kind of a different take on it, and it was nice to have it as a soup because it was really, really cold this weekend. So I'm going to go ahead and cook that in the Instant Pot according to the directions in the cookbook. It's 25 minutes on high pressure. And then when that's done, you will stir in your dried egg noodles, just a half a package, and then cook it on high pressure again for 2 minutes. And then the soup will be completed. So once the pasta is done cooking, you can do a quick release, and then you're just going to take out a couple cups of the cooking liquid and put that into a bowl and whisk it with some sour cream. This is what makes it taste like beef stroganoff. If you guys have ever made beef stroganoff, you know that there's sour cream mixed in at the end, which kind of gives it that creamy feeling. So just put that back in the Instant Pot, stir it up really well, and then I went ahead and tasted it just to make sure that the broth tasted good and there weren't any seasonings that were needed. Here's a look at what it looks like cooked up. I served this with some veggies and dip on the side along with some rolls. And if you're interested in any of the recipes I shared today, please check the description box below to find those. If there are any I missed, let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I hope I have convinced you that you need an Instant Pot for your kitchen as well, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.